Hey guys, tonight we're venturing into the dewy, faintly ridiculous world of medieval goose herding, a noble calling involving mud-caked boots, unexpected bureaucracy, and a lot more honking than any job should reasonably include. You are a goose herder. Or at least, you're about to be. You're up before the sun, tucked in a straw-stuffed tunic that still smells like last autumn, shuffling out of a thatched cottage door with the sort of determined sleepiness only livestock work can summon. It's cold. Everything is damp. The fog hugs the low grass like a wet sheepdog in a mood. Out in the pasture, your charges await. 37 geese. Some white, some spotted, one mildly evil. They're already awake, of course. Geese don't sleep like normal creatures. They doze in shifts, constantly alert for foxes, rival flocks, or the concept of unseasoned porridge. One honks at you as you approach. Another pecks the air threateningly. You're home. Medieval goose herding isn't glamorous. It isn't romantic. But it is, strangely, a respected corner of the agrarian world. While cows may have provided milk and pigs' fat, geese were the mobile economic unit of the peasant class. Eggs, meat, down, quills. There was hardly a bit of a goose that wasn't useful or taxable. Some even say a good goose could pay your rent. Historians still argue whether geese were more economically valuable than sheep in certain 14th century manners, but one thing's certain, if you were responsible for them, you were someone. Someone trustworthy. Someone stubborn. Someone with very tired feet. You trudge to the wooden paddock gate, which creaks ominously as you unlatch it. The geese don't wait. They surge forward like fluffy aristocrats late for a joust. You step back quickly, letting them pass, staff in hand, calling out the names only you seem to remember. Clatter, you're first, no biting. Mags, left flank. Buttons, behave. Buttons does not behave. You knew that already. The route you'll take today leads through a patch of grazing rights land, up a muddy rise the locals call Bunyan's Knoll, then down toward the edge of a willow marsh where the grass grows soft and fattening. That's where the best forage is, though you'll need to keep an eye out for sinkholes. And widows. One in particular likes to lure geese with stale rye crusts and suspicious flattery. You tap the ground with your crook. The sound is soft, familiar. The geese respond, forming something like order. Not a line. Never a line. But a sort of waddling rhythm, chaotic but directional. You've learned to read it the way monks read weather, squinting, guessing, and pretending you knew it all along. Today, the air smells like nettles and possible trouble. You pass a carved milestone near the edge of the trail. It's covered in lichen and dated so faintly it might as well say someone. You tap it anyway, twice, for luck. Goose herders are famously superstitious. Or at least you are. You remember once, years ago, you failed to tap the stone and buttons vanished for 3 days. Came back wearing a piece of ribbon no one could explain. He still refuses to honk about it. The village rises behind you as you lead the geese toward open pasture, its chimneys beginning to puff like sleepy giants shaking off the dreams of night. You'll be gone most of the day. Maybe 2. It depends on the weather, the forage, and how badly Buttons wants to stage a mutiny. But that's the way of it. You are a herder of geese. A keeper of flocks. A strangely underpaid cornerstone of rural infrastructure. You carry no sword. No scrolls. Just a crooked stick and a pouch of oats, and yet somehow, when you walk into town, people move aside. Not because they respect you. Because your boots are terrible and your geese are worse. At the top of Bunyan's Knoll, you stop to catch your breath. The geese do not stop. They spread out, foraging, pecking, squabbling, conducting whatever private arguments geese seem to be perpetually embroiled in. You sit on a flat stone and rub your feet. In the distance, you see another herder. Far off, a tiny figure beside a miniature cloud of white. You squint. You think it's Elda. Or maybe John. Or possibly that lad who speaks only in rhymed warnings about goose tempers. You wave. They do not wave back. Typical. The thing about goose herders is we're a suspicious lot. We love a communal bake, a winter wassail, sure, but we're not the trusting sort. We watch the skies, the ground, and our own geese more than we watch each other. Goose politics, after all, are complicated. There was once a treaty, unofficial, inked in egg yolk between rival flocks, to maintain pasture boundaries. That treaty was broken in an incident still known in local folklore as the feathered tumult. It involved a loud misunderstanding, 3 missing goslings, and a boot full of mashed parsnip. No one talks about it. Everyone remembers it. The sun rises higher. A faint breeze picks up. The geese continue their slow march of judgment upon the land. You, meanwhile, reach for the oat pouch. It's mostly full. That's good. A hungry goose is a loud goose. And a loud goose is a political liability. You toss a handful into the grass and watch them swarm. There is peace for a moment. Tranquility, punctuated by beak clacks and occasional haughty honking. The morning light settles softly across the field. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rings. It is not for you. But you nod anyway. Because out here, it's just you, the mud, and 37 lives that would frankly overthrow your entire sense of order if given half a chance. But not today. Today, they follow. Because today, you remembered the oat pouch. And because Buttons, for reasons unknown, has decided, for now, not to lead a revolution. The thing no one tells you about goose traffic laws is just how real they were. Not metaphorically, not humorously, legally. And as you approach the first village gate, crooked staff in one hand and at least 7 increasingly skeptical geese flanking your left leg, you remember that you're technically trespassing unless you've declared your gaggle. So you stop at the signpost. It's old. Bent. Written in fading ochre ink. But it's official, because it has the 3 required symbols, a sheaf of grain, a bishop's hat, and a goose mid-stride, looking somehow both determined and judgmental. You pull out your wooden tally board and notch today's count. 37 geese, declared with full intention to pass through South Fenwick on your way to Marsh Bottom pasture. No trade intended. 1 honorary gosling not present due to injury, that's Ed Ward. He's still on convalescence duty after a spirited tumble into a cider vat. The board clicks once. Somewhere, in theory, a clerk in the Abbey writes this down. In reality, the clerk is probably asleep or drunk or both. But rules are rules, and the life of a gooseherder is built on the extremely wobbly foundation of such customs. Historians still argue whether these goose declaration points were originally devised as a form of tax, crowd control, or elaborate prank. Either way, they've stuck around. And you're not about to challenge centuries of waddling precedent just because Buttons is growing impatient. You tap the staff twice against the stones, which serves as the ancient and universally acknowledged signal for geese incoming. A child peers out from behind a doorway. Then disappears with a yelp of "Ma!" They're coming through again. You give it a minute, waiting for shopkeepers to yank in their wares and old ladies to remove particularly honkyable flower pots. Then you enter the village. Your geese follow in a sort of chaotic V formation that vaguely suggests discipline and, more accurately, suggests 7 small disputes over who leads and who deserves the shade. South Fenwick is barely more than 4 crooked streets, a lopsided inn, and a bakery that claims, on very questionable signage, to have invented the concept of crust. You steer the flock with slow gestures, crook raised just slightly, tapping your boot twice for Buttons, once for Mags, and a disgruntled hunt for the new goose you're calling Clove until it earns a proper name. The villagers step back respectfully. Not out of admiration, but because medieval goose poop is essentially permanent. You pass the blacksmith's window. He nods. You pass the cooper's daughter. She curtsies. You pass the baker's boy, who hurls a stale scone at Mags and immediately regrets everything he's ever done. She hisses, puffs up like a bellows, and honks with the fury of 10 tiny winds. You do not stop her. Because the lesson must be learned. She calms eventually. The scone is pecked into submission. Order is restored. Then you reach the village square. There, as ever, is the goose board. An actual, physical slab of painted wood mounted beside the well, on which the current goose rules are displayed. A new set every season, updated based on migratory shifts, market prices, and the mood of the reeve. You read them aloud as you always do, mostly to entertain the geese, who are scandalously nosy. Current goose ordinances, spring rotation. No goose may honk between Compline and Matins unless provoked by a cleric. Geese passing through the market must wear a visible foot ribbon if they are not for sale. Flocks larger than 25 must divide evenly at crossroads unless otherwise directed by a bellwether goose. No foraging in the churchyard, regardless of mushroom temptation. Any goose discovered with a smuggled truffle will be treated as a foreign agent. You glance down at Buttons. He glances back. You both know Rule 5 is aimed squarely at him. The last truffle incident involved 3 monks, a missing map, and the mysterious overnight construction of an herb spiral no one remembered designing. You press onward. At the far end of the square sits the honking post. It's ornamental, mostly symbolic, shaped like a goose in mid-trumpet. Gooseherders are encouraged, but not required, to honk once, in solidarity with their feathered compatriots. You consider it. Then shrug and let out your best honk. It's not bad. Somewhere, a goose claps. Or maybe flaps. It's hard to say. You continue out the north gate. Your geese trail behind you, and for once, they do it quietly. The village falls away, replaced by hedgerows and damp grass. You feel better out here. Away from eyes. Out in the open. There's something deeply pleasing about the sound of geese on soft earth. The gentle slap of webbed feet. The occasional low muttering honk. The feather-fluffing rustle like someone shaking out laundry in a cathedral. You walk in rhythm. 3 steps, pause. Scan for foxes. 3 steps, pause. Check Buttons, count mags. 3 steps, pause. Wonder if it's going to rain. It always feels like it's going to rain. You reach the old milestone on the edge of village land. This one's less official. Carved into the base is a goose, very round, very judgmental, and the faded words. Here walked Alfric, who led them best. Alfric the Honked. The first goose warden, according to local myth. Some say he could speak fluent Gander. Others claim he once settled a land dispute between swans and ducks using only a glockenspiel and a meat pie. No one knows how much of that is true. You touch the stone lightly and keep walking. Because you know better than to question Alfric's legacy. And besides, your own geese are starting to slow. Which means pasture is near. You crest a low hill, and there it is. Marsh bottom. Wide, green, squelchy. Full of succulent roots, ankle-deep puddles, and the unmistakable air of poultry satisfaction. The geese cheer. Not literally, but close. Buttons runs forward. Mags flaps. Clove honks in a way that may or may not be complimentary. You watch them spread out into the field. This is the job. Not the rules, not the gate notching, not the stilted village square performances. It's this. Letting the geese eat. Waddle. Bicker. Live. You sit on a rock. Pull out a bit of cheese. And smile. Because while the laws of the land may twist and turn, the ancient truth remains. Somewhere, deep in the heart of every human, is the quiet, unshakable belief that a well-fed goose makes the world just slightly better. You don't wear the cloak of the goose warden often. It's heavy. Musty. It smells like celery, and betrayal. But it's part of the role. And once a fortnight, tradition requires that you put it on, button by inconvenient button, and march your waddling companions through the village square like the half-respected livestock bureaucrat you truly are. The cloak itself is an odd relic. Historians still argue whether it was originally designed to command respect or simply to store grain. It's woolen, naturally, but stitched with dozens of deep interior pockets. One was found to contain an apple from 2 harvests ago. Another still carries feathers from a legendary gander named Picklefoot, who once chased a bishop straight through a bramble patch for staring too long at his mate. There's a clasp shaped like a goose head. There are tassels. There's a faded badge that reads, in poor Latin, "He who honks with dignity." No one honks with dignity. Not really. But you don the cloak nonetheless, early on the 3rd morning of the spring circuit, as the marsh mists still cling to the fields and the geese stir lazily among the reeds. Buttons eyes the cloak suspiciously. He associates it with rules, with inspections, with the time you made him wear a commemorative bonnet and he tried to sue you in bird court. You pat him on the head. He hisses, politely. Then you gather the flock and begin the ceremonial march toward Fairwillow. Today's duties include Goose census verification, a post-feathering field report, and, most awkwardly, the annual cloak procession, where you must present your flock to the village reeve while reciting a chant written by someone who once rhymed plumpness with righteousness and never apologized. You trudge. The geese follow. It's all surprisingly civil, until Clove breaks rank and waddles straight into a merchant's cart, where she attempts to eat 2 pickled onions and a decorative feather duster. She is stopped. Eventually, apologies are issued. Buttons snickers. By the time you arrive at Fairwillow's central square, a small audience has gathered. Children. Old women with baskets. That man who always wears a velvet hat regardless of weather or relevance. They love the cloak. Mostly because it looks faintly ridiculous, and has been known to shed feathers even when you haven't handled any birds yet. You step onto the low stone platform, clear your throat, and raise your staff. By order of the Goose Warden's Guild, you announce, I present 37 birds, sound of beak, sound of body, and prepared for the record. The reeve approaches. He's a thin man, largely held together by rules and oatcakes. He eyes the flock. Counts. Twice. Then nods. Mags looks molty, he says. She's molting with distinction, you reply. Cloves lopsided. Working through some feelings. He nods again. Taps a scroll. Scribbles something with a quill that squeaks audibly, like it's protesting its entire existence. Then he gestures to the cloak. Inspection time. You sigh, spread your arms, and allow the reeve to poke at the various ceremonial pockets with the formal inspection spoon. This is a real spoon. Polished brass. It hasn't been used to eat since the turnip disagreement of 1314, which soured many things, including soup. Pocket 1, spare oat bundle. Acceptable. Pocket 2, ledger parchment blank. Also fine. Pocket 3, a surprisingly well-preserved biscuit from last Michaelmas. Eaten on the spot. No comment made. Pocket 4, a mysterious token engraved with a goose and an hourglass. The reeve pauses. Raises an eyebrow. You cough gently. Found it in the marsh. Likely decorative. He nods again, too slowly. Keep an eye on that one, he says. And then the ritual ends. You step down, remove the cloak with the relief of a man shrugging off both tradition and a modest weight in damp wool, and stuff it into its protective sackcloth wrap. A child runs up to you. Do they have names? She asks, pointing at the flock. You nod. All of them. She giggles. Do they know their names? You pause. Consider. Some do, you say honestly. Some pretend they don't. Buttons honks pointedly, as if to remind you who's really in charge. You offer the girl a feather. She beams. Then runs back to her mother, who eyes you like someone who suspects your job is contagious. With the official business over, you steer the flock around the back of the market square, toward the grassy embankment known locally as the Broad Patch. It's where off-duty livestock go to loaf politely while their handlers sample things like cider, cheese, or very dry bread rolls. You sit on the edge of the slope, take out your own lunch, and nibble while watching the geese groom, gossip, and pretend not to plot something. Next to you sits Aldwin, the sheep wrangler from Lardcroft. He nods in greeting, mouth full of parsnip. Still doing the cloak bit, eh? You sigh. Tradition. Stupid tradition, he mutters. Our flock master's cloak caught fire last week. Candle situation. Ceremonial candle? Nope. Just clumsy. He chuckles. You both watch as Buttons tries to impress 2 lady geese by standing on one leg and nearly falling over. Aldwin tosses him a crust. He ignores it. Then eats it resentfully. You know, Aldwin says between bites, I heard the cloaks used to be enchanted. You blink. Enchanted? Back in the day, he says, waving vaguely. Said to hum when the geese were in danger. Or shimmer if you lied about the census. You raise an eyebrow. Convenient. Or total hogwash, he adds. But charming hogwash. You finish your lunch in silence. The sun begins to tilt toward the west, casting long goose-shaped shadows across the field. The procession is done. The flock is fed. The cloak is stowed. And for now, everything is as it should be. Still, as you rise and gather your staff, you feel something strange in the pocket of your tunic. Not the cloak. Your tunic. A small feather. Glossy. Black-tipped. Not one of yours. You glance toward the far edge of the field, where a lone goose stands, watching, then waddles away. You squint. But it's gone. And for the first time in a long while, you wonder, was the cloak ever really just for show? Geese, in the medieval economy, were worth more than their weight in gossip. You don't realize it until you're standing at the tax reckoning bench, with your 37 accounted for geese clucking softly in the background, and the steward in his short, grimy tabard raises an eyebrow at your tally slip. 2.5 silver groats per gander? He asks, voice brittle with disbelief, or jealousy. You nod, not smiling. Because you've done the math. You've read the regulations. You even attended that one workshop in Lower Pramble about medieval livestock valuation, mostly because they served ginger beer. Yes, you say calmly. And 1 full penny per laying hen, with egg projections for spring. The steward grunts. Behind him, a small boy records everything with a feather quill far longer than his own forearm. His ink pot is shaped like a pumpkin. His shoes are on the wrong feet. And yet, this is governance. The value of a goose wasn't just in its meat, or even its down. Geese were mobile assets. Currency with legs. Dowries could be measured in geese. So could fines. In one particularly well-documented feud in a hamlet outside of Toulouse, a woman settled a boundary dispute by offering her neighbor 2 geese and a bundle of elderflower in exchange for 5 paces of herb garden and mutual silence. The documents remain. The elderflower did not. Even wills included goose clauses. There are accounts of arguments lasting generations over who inherited which gander, especially if the bird had favorable temperament and shine. Some even claimed lineage to the golden gosling of Alfriston, though that bird was almost certainly a prank involving flour and desperation. Today, your flock is just valuable enough to warrant a formal record. Are these geese for market or ritual? The steward asks. You blink. Then say, is there a difference? He grunts again. You pay your goose fee, 3 tokens and a small cloth scrap embroidered with your herder's sigil, a slightly tilted spoon, and move on. The flock, restless from the wait, begins to pace. Mags honks with the kind of emphasis that implies she thinks this was all handled very inefficiently. You agree. So you walk them toward the old crossing bridge. It's not especially scenic. Half-rotted, held together by prayer and aggressive moss, but it spans the creek that separates the tax lands from the wider meadows where you'll pasture for the next few days. As you cross, you think again of the role these birds play in local life. Not just food. Not just feather farms. But status. A well-managed flock means prestige. A large flock? Even more. A flock that doesn't bite the reeve's daughter or destroy the churchyard's crocus beds. Practically nobility. Of course, Buttons has set your prestige back a bit. But he's also the only goose to ever retrieve a dropped apple from a mill pond without panicking or causing collateral damage. He's unpredictable. But helpful. Much like your entire profession. Geese require attention. Patience. The sort of soft authority that looks effortless but really isn't. You've met other herders, those who use harsh commands or whistles, and you've seen what happens. The geese revolt. They hide in nettle patches. They recruit squirrels. They fake injuries and lead entire flocks on sympathy marches. But not yours. Your geese follow you. Grudgingly, yes. But they follow. And that means something. By the time you reach the next field, A wide open stretch bordered by elder hedges and occasional toadstone piles. The sun is high, and your feet ache. You let the geese scatter. Not wildly, just enough. They know where the thistle clumps are, where the best grubs linger, where the farmer's daughter sometimes leaves her apple cores when she thinks no one's looking. You settle beneath a willow. Take out your logbook. Yes, goose herding involves a logbook. At least if you're part of the guild. You flip to the current season's page. Draw a small map of your path so far. Add notes. Buttons glared at scribe. Possible vendetta forming. Mags preened excessively. Molting ritual? Investigate. Unidentified black-tipped feather. Might belong to Cloakline. Ask Finchett. Reeves' clerk still barefoot. Apply to have him assign boots. Again. Then you pause. You hear something. Not a rustle. Not a fox. A bell. Tiny far off. Ting, ting, ting. You stand slow. Scan the field. There, near the far hedge, Clove has found something. You walk toward her, staff in hand, feet squelching. She's pecking gently at a small wooden frame. Not a trap. Not a crate. A message board. An old one. Hidden behind nettles. You lean closer. Inside the frame is a roll of parchment, wax-sealed, affixed with the Goose Guild's lesser-known crest, 2 geese crossing beaks under a banner that reads, in silence, formation. You break the seal. Unroll the parchment. It's instructions? A set of new guidelines. Or amendments? You scan quickly. Revised pasture etiquette for shared flocks. Updated dispute resolution practices. New recognition codes for night herding between borders. And a note. Handwritten. Just 3 words. Blackbeak returns. You stare. Blink. Clove honks quietly. Blackbeak? A legend. A fable, really. An enormous gander said to have led a breakaway flock into the hills decades ago. Some say he lived beyond normal lifespan through sheer belligerence and a diet of stolen plums. Some say he was never real. You pocket the parchment. Look at Clove. Let's not mention this to Buttons just yet. She nods. Or sneezes. It's hard to tell. You return to your willow, sit, and exhale slowly. It seems the world of goose herding isn't done surprising you. Not even close. But for now, you let the geese wander. Graze. Live. You fold the parchment into your logbook. And listen to the wind hum softly through feathers and read. Whatever's coming. You'll face it with your staff in hand and oat pouch ready. Because that's what goose herders do. There are a great many things geese are good at, shouting, judging, menacing small objects, but you never quite get over how remarkably clever they can be when they think no one's watching. Take Buttons, for instance. You notice it first in the way he moves when you're pretending to sleep. The way he slows down, waits until you've closed your eyes, you're half covered in your cloak with one boot still on, so not exactly convincing, and then, without fail, he circles back toward your pack. Not boldly. Not greedily. With a quiet precision. He rummages. Not for food. Not for oats. For paper. Yesterday it was a supply list. Last week it was your cousin's birthday note. And today? Today it's the migration ledger. You open one eye and catch him, beak halfway into the rolled parchment, eyes glinting like he's about to unlock the secrets of the known world. You sit up. Buttons. He freezes. The parchment unfurls gently at his feet. You lock eyes. There is a long pause in which no one speaks, but much is communicated. And then, as if nothing happened, Buttons honks, steps over the paper, and walks away. Historians still argue whether geese were genuinely used for long-distance message carrying in the way that pigeons were. There are tantalizing scraps in several abbey records suggesting that, yes, some noble households may have trained geese to carry small notes, tied beneath their wings, especially in remote, damp regions where other birds struggled. The practice didn't last, of course. Geese are moody, and far more likely to read the message aloud mid-flight out of spite. But you've seen enough to suspect there's something to the story. The ledger itself is a mystery. Passed down from herder to herder, inked in clumsy but committed handwriting, with migration patterns going back decades. No names. Just flock numbers, weather symbols, foot diagrams, and your favorite, little sketches of fields with ominous faces drawn in the trees. You turn to the most recent page. The notes from the previous warden, Old Realm, are sparse. Just 4 lines. Spring, return normal. Mag suspicious. Blackbeak not confirmed. Left pouch for next. You never found a pouch. You even checked under the stump near the alder grove, where tradition says all last resorts must be buried. Nothing. Either Realm was joking, or someone beat you to it. You frown and scratch a few updates into the margins. Clove inquisitive. Buttons attempting espionage again. New symbol spotted, feather in circle. Possibly guild code? Then you turn the page. Blank. You hesitate. Then draw a crude diagram of today's route, add a tiny doodle of buttons standing on a suspicious box, and close the book. The ledger is less of a log and more of a whisper. It doesn't explain much, but it remembers. As you're about to tuck it away, you hear a very specific kind of honk, the kind that means stranger approaching but also do we like them or no? You rise. Squint across the field. And there he is. Finchett. Warden of the Northern Bogs. Goose herder. Lantern collector. Persistent exaggerator. He walks with a staff taller than himself, and a goose named Lintel who's so old she's mostly beard at this point. You wave. He waves back, slowly, as if checking for wind resistance. Then he calls out, "You seen the ledger?" You frown. "Which one?" He grins. "The other one." You blink. "There's another?" He shrugs. "Some say so." "Have you seen it?" "Oh, heavens no. But I did hear tell of it at the Goose Games last autumn. Supposedly kept by a breakaway flock up by the Slate Hills. Written entirely in Beak code. That sounds made up. Nearly everything I say is, Finchett agrees. He reaches you, settles beside the log with a grunt, and removes his cap. His hair is mostly wind and theories. "You feel it?" he asks. "Feel what?" He taps his nose. "The shift." You do. It's hard to describe. Something in the wind. A pattern in how the flock circles the grazing patch. A quiet tension in Mag's tail feathers. "They say it happens every 37 years, Finchett mutters. They being mostly geese. You chuckle, but the sound doesn't stick. Finchett leans closer. "You know the field just past Mill Hollow?" You nod. "Don't take them there," he says. "Why not?" He pauses. Then says with complete seriousness, "It remembers too much." You nod slowly. "Right." A beat passes. Then Lintel honks. Loudly. Finchett rises. She's hungry. And she gets violent when hungry. Like me, but less apologetic. You watch him disappear down the far hill, cloak flapping, staff wagging slightly with every step. You sigh. Turn back to your own flock. They're milling near the bramble thicket now. You count. 35. Then 36. Pause. You count again. Buttons. Clove. Mags. Missing one? You scan the field. Ah. The new one. The nameless one. You'd been calling him that one with the confused walk. He's halfway up a small rise, nose to the ground, pecking at a strange pile of stones arranged in a spiral. You walk over. The stones are odd. Neatly placed. A pattern unmistakably. In the center, a feather. Black-tipped. You kneel, pick it up. No note. Just the feather. And on the stone beside it, scratched faintly in what looks like claw or nail or furious beak. He remembers. You glance at the goose. He looks up at you, tilts his head, and sneezes. Again, possibly symbolic. You pocket the feather. Pat the goose. And mutter you need a name. He honks quietly. You think for a moment. Then smile. Whisper. He honks again. Approvingly. You heard the flock together. The sun is dipping now. The wind carries stories. And your ledger has another feather to press. Whatever's coming, your gaggle will face it together. One beak, one step, one baffling honk at a time. Feeding time is not as simple as tossing oats and hoping for peace. Feeding time, as you've come to learn, is a game of politics. 1 part strategy, 2 parts observation, and at least 6 parts trying not to get pecked in the shin by someone who believes they deserve better seating arrangements. You begin as always. The oat pouch, your trusted companion, jingles lightly as you untie the cord. Every goose watches. Some pretend they're not. Mags attempts indifference by inspecting a pebble, but her eyes are firmly on your hands. Buttons fluffs himself into extra height. Clove has already made 3 attempts at shortcutting the process by simply nudging your knee. You reach in. There's a hush, well, a honk muffled pause, as you cast the first handful in a wide, slow arc onto the grass. Now the real dance begins. Buttons makes his usual power play, darting toward the middle of the feed zone with the practiced swagger of a minor duke at a country ball. Mags intercepts, her wing brushing him just enough to remind him this isn't his court. Meanwhile, Whisper hangs back, nibbling discreetly at a fringe of clover, as if to say, I am above this, unless that oat clump is unclaimed in 5 seconds. And the new ones? They follow. Their moves are more hesitant, half-learned cues from the veterans, mixed with wild improvisations. One honks at a tree root. Another tries to court a rock. You sigh, then smile. Because here it is, the pecking order in full display. Not just literal pecking. Social dynamics. Feathered drama. Historians still argue whether goose hierarchies were stable enough to constitute formal flock governments. Some suggest that certain flocks maintained long-term leaders, alpha ganders, while others rotated power seasonally or upon the completion of molting. There's even a monastery record describing an experiment in which one flock was presented with multiple food zones to observe their redistribution patterns. The geese promptly ignored all zones and broke into the refectory, eating 3 pies and pooping in the library. The monks never repeated the study. You crouch by the outer edge of the field and observe. Feeding order, you found, reveals more than any census. Who eats first? Who pretends not to care but always finds the fullest patch? Who shares? And who hoards? Buttons, of course, still believes all oats are his by right. But today Mags leads the feast. Not forcefully. Just gracefully. She steps in first, nudges Buttons aside, and somehow the others follow. Even he doesn't protest. Much. You make a note in your log. Mags ascended. Observe next session. Then something shifts. A rustle. You glance toward the hedgerow. It's just wind, you tell yourself. Until you hear the second rustle. Deliberate. Measured. You rise. Step slowly toward the brush, the oat pouch swaying gently at your side. Your boots squelch in soft mud. The breeze has stilled. And there, just beyond the hedge, a child? No. Too small. Too feathered. A goose. Alone. Watching. Not one of yours. Gray plumage. Left wing marked with a faint ribbon. Unfamiliar gait, graceful, careful. Not like the rest. You hold your breath. It doesn't flee. Instead, it turns, slowly, and waddles back into the brush. You hesitate, then follow. Only for a few steps. You push aside a branch. The field beyond is empty. No goose. No tracks. Just a flattened patch of grass, shaped vaguely like a spiral. You return to the flock. And find Whisper waiting. Not near the oats. Near the cloak sack. He nudges it once. Then steps back. You blink. Open it. And there, tucked into the lining, is something you did not put there. A scroll. Sealed with wax and bound in a rough ribbon, barely visible unless the light hits just so. You unroll it. It's not instructions. It's poetry? No, not quite. Rhyme, but crude. Doggerel. Possibly composed by a novice monk or a tipsy scribe. When Mags doth lead, and buttons yield, the honking pact returns unsealed. Should whisper walk where shadows tilt, then watch the hedge of woven guilt. You read it twice, then tuck it away. Goose poetry. You've reached a new milestone. You glance at the geese. They're back to feeding now. No drama. Just calm. Even buttons. Especially buttons. You sit beside them and offer the last handful by hand. Mags takes hers gently. Whisper waits until you nod. Clove bites too hard and then looks apologetic. As dusk begins to soften the edge of the sky, you notice something curious. They're settling in a new formation. Not the usual cluster, but a loose crescent, with Mags at the curve and buttons oddly quiet behind her. Whisper circles the edges like a silent sentry, while Clove flutters to the rear, nesting in a dip in the grass. You've seen diagrams like this. In the ledger. In the parchment you found last week. In the stories Realm used to mutter when the cider ran low. The honking pact. A fable, they say. But everything in goose herding is half fable. And now, it seems, you're inside one. You stretch out on the grass, listening to the soft rustle of feathers and the low sigh of the evening breeze. One goose, maybe Buttons, snores gently. It sounds like a deflating bagpipe, but in a strangely comforting way. You close your eyes. Think about oats. Think about spirals in the grass. And think, perhaps for the first time, that your job is more than mud and honking and scandalous feather theft. It's a trust. A legacy. And maybe, just maybe, a secret. Whisper curls beside you. Warm. Quiet. Watching the shadows tilt. You wake with a goose on your chest. This is not unusual. In fact, it's fairly standard. But it is slightly unsettling when the goose in question is Whisper, who, until now, has maintained a dignified perimeter and preferred to sleep at least 2 wingspans away from any entanglement that might suggest affection or warmth. Now he stares at you with unblinking goose focus, his beak about 3 inches from your left eye. Good morning, you whisper. He does not reply. But he does hop off, strutting toward the ledger pouch with the precision of someone delivering an agenda. You stretch. Rub your face. Wonder whether that dream about the goose poetry was, in fact, a dream. Then remember the scroll tucked in the cloak's lining. Nope. Very real. You fish it out. Reread the verse. Still makes no sense. Still rhymes. Still unnerving. And now Whisper has taken it upon himself to peck the corner of your oat sack repeatedly, like a living alarm clock demanding breakfast, justice, or both. You rustle together a quick morning feed, oats sprinkled with a dash of elder leaf and half a turnip. Gourmet, by goose standards. Mags arrives first, then Buttons, who makes a big show of not caring but still manages to cut in line. The younger ones trail behind. You do a count out of habit. 1 missing. Clove. Again. You scan the field. Nothing. No honk. No flapping. No sign. You grab your staff, tuck the ledger under your arm, and motion to Buttons. He stares back like you've just asked him to recite a sermon. Come on, you say. Field patrol. He grumbles, yes, literally, but follows. You find Clove at the edge of the hedgerow, beak deep in what appears to be a suspiciously clean pile of moss. She looks up as you approach, puffing slightly, and flaps her wings like a child caught sneaking second breakfast. You wave Buttons off and kneel down. It's not moss. It's a pouch. A very old pouch. Oilcloth. Bound with twine. Smells faintly of thyme and mildew and, for some reason, raisins. You open it slowly. Inside is a scrap of parchment, fragile but intact, and something heavier. A carved bone token etched with the same feather and circle symbol you saw etched into that rock 3 days ago. You hold the token up to the light. It catches a beam of morning sun and glows faintly. Then the parchment slips free. This time, no verse. Just a phrase. Spirals mark the paths of memory. Return where you first lost the count. You sit back. Think. Return where you first lost the count. That was the field by the stream. A week ago, maybe? The one with the crooked milestone and the unusually energetic snail migration. You remember being short one goose for a few minutes before Buttons coughed up a piece of ribbon and pretended nothing had happened. You return to camp. The geese are preening. Whisper has taken over your logbook and appears to be doodling with a stick. You pack light. Just the staff, a small oat parcel, and the pouch. You nudge Buttons. With me. He sighs. But he comes. Because he knows, somehow, that this is bigger than breakfast. The walk to the stream takes an hour. The fields are quiet. Dew clings to your boots. The sky is that milky early gray blue, soft as linen. You find the milestone. Still crooked. Still covered in lichen and bad poetry. You scan the grass. Nothing. But Buttons is already digging. Well, pecking. And in the shallow depression where the grass bends unnaturally inward, you spot it. Another spiral. This one made of twigs. Ferns. Tiny feathers arranged precisely. And at the center, another token. Different design this time, 2 geese beak to beak, with a crescent moon hovering over them. You add it to your pouch. Then look around. There are more. You find 3 spirals within 50 yards. One contains a small bell. One, a woven thread bracelet dyed with beetroot and ash. And one holds a list. You kneel. Brush it off. It's a goose census. But not your handwriting. Not realms either. You study it. The names are strange. Goose names certainly, but old ones. Siltwing. Taper. More moss. Fern shade. His cell. Each name has a symbol beside it. A dot, or a cross, or a curve. Next to one, Siltwing, is a tiny star. Then, scrawled at the bottom. They left. But not alone. You sit back and take a long breath. The migration ledger never mentioned this. Not even Rilm's weird cider footnote entries. You fold the paper. Pocket it. The spirals are a message. Or a map. You're not sure yet. But you know this much: someone, maybe some goose, is tracking these clues. And they want you to find them. Buttons nips your boot. You nod. Let's go. The walk back is quieter. Even Buttons doesn't honk. When you return, Whisper meets you halfway. He looks at the pouch. Sniffs it. Then, very deliberately, walks 3 circles around you. And lies down. At your feet. As if to say, we're with you. Mags joins. Then Clove. Then the others. Even the goose you're still calling sorta Steve. And you realize, whatever this is, it's not a solo job anymore. It's a flock thing now. A mystery you're not solving alone. You pull out the ledger. Flip to a fresh page. Write in blocky, deliberate strokes. Spirals located. Tokens retrieved. Geese aware. Investigation becomes collective. Then you draw a little sketch. A spiral. With a goose at its center. Head turned toward the moon. You don't know what's coming. But you know one thing. You're a goose herder. And you have a job to do. And now? Now it involves secrets, symbols. And the quiet, honking patience of a very determined flock. There is something deeply ridiculous about putting shoes on a goose. And yet here you are. It's not just a whim, it's regulation, oddly enough. Guild bylaws state that when geese must cross cobbled ground or ceremonial paths, protection of the foot is both humane and symbolically appropriate. So you crouch beside a wooden crate labeled festival equipment, do not eat, a label which Buttons, naturally, has already tried to disprove, and begin the process of strapping tiny, soft leather booties onto your most cooperative honkers. Mags goes first. She extends one foot with something approaching dignity. You slip the boot on, tighten the little strap with a loop, and give her a nod. She responds with a small trill and immediately begins clomping around like she's just inherited an entire estate. Whisper takes his turn with less enthusiasm. He stares at the boot, the crate, you, then back at the boot again, as if conducting a very serious internal ethics debate. Eventually, he relents. Once the shoes are on, he lifts one foot experimentally, then the other, then tries walking in a figure eight before settling back into the grass with a dramatic sigh. You can almost hear it. Footwear? In this economy? Then comes buttons. Of course. He waits until you approach, then flops over sideways with the dramatics of a fainting duchess. You roll your eyes. It's ceremonial, not punishment. He rolls further into the grass. It takes a little coaxing and a single old bribe, but eventually, even Buttons stands upright, grumbling as you fasten the boots, each one dyed faintly red, his official color from last year's Honk parade. Because yes, that's a thing. The Honk parade, held annually in the nearby town of Willerford, celebrates the Goose's role in community defense, crop management, and mild domestic terror. Participants, human and bird alike, march through the village square, honking in proud formation. Prizes are given for best feather shine, most expressive gander, and most consistent step timing in adverse weather. Your flock didn't win last year. They did, however, steal 3 pies and a decorative cabbage, which some viewed as a moral victory. Today's booting is for a less elaborate event. The mid-spring inspection. A minor holiday in the Gooseherders Guild calendar, but one with considerable pageantry. And the inspection is to be held at Tetherby Cross, a cobbled square notorious for snagging goose feet and once, eating an entire cartwheel. Hence the boots. Historians still argue whether geese in footwear were seen as practical solutions or elaborate satire. Some illustrations depict them wearing gilded slippers, feathers combed to an unnatural shine, others show splayed, confused birds tripping over their own steps, followed by wide-eyed scribes holding measuring rods and probably laughing behind their scrolls. You've seen both outcomes. And you're hoping today leans toward the former. With the flock appropriately shod, you set off down the main track, past the stone orchard wall, through the elder groves where birds chuckle and foxes occasionally mutter conspiracies. The walk is uneventful, until it isn't. At the 3rd mile marker, you spot a figure ahead. Human. Cloaked. Standing in the middle of the road. Unmoving. You slow your pace. The geese begin to cluster behind you, feet clip-clopping softly on the packed dirt. You raise a hand in greeting. The figure nods. Steps aside. Then, without a word, places something on the ground. And walks away. Just like that. You approach slowly. The object is a satchel. Not a random one. Guild issue. Embroidered with the classic sigil, 2 crossing feathers over a slice of bread. The old crest, before they rebranded in year of the lemon dispute. You kneel. Open the flap. Inside, papers. Tokens. A carved whistle. And a scroll. More rhyming. Boots on cobble, test the tread. Count not twice what once has fled. If steps align and stones remain. The goose keep wakes, and walks again. You sit down on a low fence post, blinking slowly. There's a name at the bottom, Herluin. You recognize it. The first recorded warden of the eastern marshes. From 3 centuries ago. You glance at Whisper, who now stands beside you, gaze fixed on the satchel. You hand him the whistle. He bites it once. It makes a low, airy hoo-hoo sound. Like a reed in a hollow bone. Then silence. He holds it a moment longer. Then tucks it under his wing. And walks on. Back in motion, the flock resumes their march. Your boots squelch slightly in mud. There's click lightly against the stones as you approach Tetherby. The town greets you with mild fanfare, mostly curious glances, one polite wave, and a vendor selling Goose Day cider in small, thimble-sized cups. You try one. It tastes like apple vinegar and ambition. The square is ready. Cobbles swept. Official desk in place. Reeve seated, wearing his full inspection smock, a garment resembling a rug with buttons, and a small group of onlookers watching from the bakery steps. You line up the geese. They stand surprisingly still. Boots in place. Feathers fluffed. dignity adjusted. Commence inspection, you declare. The reeve rises, accompanied by a clerk and a small dog wearing a hat. He circles the geese, nods thoughtfully, murmurs numbers, then stops at buttons. This one's wearing last year's colors. Yes, you say. By personal choice. The reeve grunts, makes a note. The dog sneezes. When the tally is done, the reeve steps back. This flock is passable, he says, which, by Tetherby standards, is an accolade. A baker claps. Someone offers you a crust. And just like that, the inspection is done. As you turn to lead your flock from the square, a small child runs up. Your goose has my whistle, she says, pointing to Whisper. You crouch. It's his now. But where did he get it? You pause. Smile faintly. He remembered. The child stares. Then nods gravely. She understands. As much as anyone can. You walk back toward the field, sun dipping low. Boots dusty. Cloak a little rumpled. Heart unusually full. And in your pouch, alongside the usual oaths and registry forms, lies a scroll written by a herder 3 centuries dead, suggesting that the goose keep, the semi-mythic guardian of the flocks, might not be gone after all. You pat the pouch, pat buttons, then whisper, just loud enough for them all to hear. I think we're walking old paths now. The geese honk once, as if to say, we never stopped. The abbey bell rings 13 times at noon, which is already suspicious. For one thing, it's supposed to ring 12. For another, it's been broken since Lent, when a particularly enthusiastic friar tried to remove a wasp nest with holy water and a very small broom. So when the final clang echoes across the meadow, every goose looks up at once. Including Whisper, who pauses mid-scratch, eyes narrowed in what you've come to interpret as mild supernatural concern. You nudge Mags gently. You hear that? She honks once. Then again. Which, in your system of field signals, roughly translates to, that was not normal, and yes, I'm offended you even had to ask. You grab your staff and start toward the abbey. It's not far, just a mile across the south field, past the old beet plot and the very angry scarecrow, whose expression someone painted far too realistically last year. The geese trail behind you in loose formation, their booties mostly removed now, though Clove insists on wearing hers like leg warmers. For aesthetic, presumably. The abbey itself is old, stone-built, and slightly slouched in posture, as if it's had one too many winters and isn't quite sure if it wants to go on being vertical. You knock on the side gate with the traditional pattern, tap, tap, thunk, honk. The little window creaks open. Brother Edwine stares back at you, his eyebrows deep in thought. Oh, he says. It's you. You nod. Is the bell fixed? No, he replies. Which is why we're all a bit jumpy. He lets you in. The geese, to his credit, are waved through without incident, though Button's eyes a nearby basket of loaves with open suspicion, and Whisper glances upward toward the bell tower as if memorizing its escape routes. You follow Edwine through the cloister walk, past damp stone walls and herb beds that smell like thyme and vinegar. Monks shuffle past, some muttering to themselves, others feeding the abbey's resident cat, who appears to be on a strict smoked herring diet and a strict no-eye contact rule. Inside the scriptorium, things are unusually chaotic. Scrolls litter the tables. Inkblots stain the floor. And in the center, illuminated by a shaft of afternoon sun, lies an open book the size of a small canoe. Brother Morris gestures wildly as you approach. We didn't ring it, he says, before you can speak. It rang itself. You glance at the others. Every monk nods. Brother Guy, who normally speaks only in coughs, actually whispers, haunted. Brother Edwine sighs. It's the ledger again. You blink. Another one? They exchange looks. Brother Morris motions you over. The book is ancient. Thick leather cover. Pages edged in soot, or something darker. The script inside is cramped but legible. And on one page, written in bold red ink, far newer than the rest. When the honk is heard at 13 tolls. The keeper walks, the memory rolls. Guard the path, the spiral bends. And mind the gander that never ends. You read it twice. Then glance at Whisper, who is now sitting next to the table, eyes locked on the page like he's reading along. Is this about the goose keep? You ask. Brother Morris hesitates. Then nods. Some say he's myth, he says. But we've always kept the records. Just in case. You lift the book carefully. Note the seal. Same feather and circle. Same as the token from the moss pouch. Same as the scratch marks back by the alder grove. So what now? You ask. Brother Edwine clears his throat. We think. You're part of it. You blink. Because I own a staff and like birds? No. Because you're the only one they follow. You glance at your flock. At Buttons, who's managed to locate a bowl of berries and is currently hissing at a pigeon. At Mags, cleaning her feathers in a sunbeam. At Whisper, still reading, unmoving. And you realize, this isn't just herding anymore. It's stewardship. A legacy. And apparently prophecy. You copy the red verse into your own ledger. Add a small sketch of the Abbey Tower with one bell mysteriously emitting smoke. Then you close the book. As you do, the room shifts. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a subtle change in light, in air, in attention. Every monk looks at the geese. The geese look at you. And somewhere, beneath the abbey floor, you think you hear a very faint honk. A deep, distant sound. From below. Is there a cellar? You ask. Brother Edwine grimaces. Several. But the oldest isn't mapped. You motion to Whisper. Lead the way, you say softly. Because apparently that's your role now. He hops down, waddles to the far wall, and taps the stones with his beak. Once. Twice. Then pauses. And honks, long and low. A section of the stone groans. Shifts. And reveals a narrow stairwell curling down into the dark. You turn to the monks. They nod wide-eyed. You don't ask for volunteers. This is your spiral. So you descend? Whisper on your left. Buttons, after sighing dramatically, on your right. The stairwell smells like old bread, forgotten ink, and a hint of moss. It's darker than it should be. Quieter than it ought to be. Until the bottom, where the air opens into a wide chamber. Stone shelves line the walls, each filled with scrolls, satchels, bones, feathers, bells. And in the center? A plinth, upon which rests a goose-shaped helm, carved wood, intricately painted, with space for your nose, and possibly your doubts. You lift it. Beneath is another scroll. This one says, "Don't panic. This is the Goosekeep's helm. Try not to sneeze inside it." You stare at Whisper. He nods solemnly. So you place the helm upon your head. It fits. Exactly. And in that moment, everything changes. You hear more clearly. The heartbeat of the flock. The whisper of feathers. The faint trace of memory echoing in every spiral, every path, every unspoken goose plan. You close your eyes. And feel it. The past. The flock. The spiral. Alive. Waiting. Watching. You open your eyes. Look at the gathered geese. They bow, very slightly. Except Buttons, who just snorts and sits down. You smile. All right, you whisper. I'll keep the path. And the echo answers. As you should. You emerge from the abbey cellar as though rising from a dream, helmet still slightly askew, head full of whispers, and a trail of bewildered monks behind you. Brother Edwine offers you a piece of shortbread. You accept. Buttons accepts too, without asking. The sunlight seems brighter now. Crisper. The field hums under your boots like it's been waiting for this moment. The breeze knows something. The clover seems smug. You are, apparently, the goose keep. Or a goose keep. One in a line of who knows how many, stretching back to spiraled parchments, token trails, and the kind of oddly specific ceremonial gear that suggests a long tradition of confusion. The helmet is stowed in your satchel for now, too heavy to wear all the time, too strange to ignore. Whisper gave it one approving peck and now keeps circling the flock like he's guarding a secret path only he can see. As you make your way back toward camp, thoughts swirl. What does a goose keep do, exactly? Who's watching? Who's waiting? Why do you suddenly crave thistle and dandelion stew? You don't get long to ponder. Because today is the Goose Guild initiation. You'd nearly forgotten. New herders from the region are gathering, as they do once a season, to receive their ceremonial rakes, binding cords, and slightly cursed whistles. You're expected to guide the initiation, not because you volunteered, but because Realm once said, give the new ones to whoever has the calmest gander. And your gander, apparently, is too calm. So you arrive at the old willow-ring clearing to find 3 apprentice herders already waiting, one with a lopsided satchel, one chewing a stalk of onion grass, and one nervously trying to shoo a goat away from her lunch. You clear your throat. They look up. Welcome, you say, to the Guild of Goose Herders. Or as I like to call it, the Honk complicated life. One chuckles. The goat sneezes. You begin the ritual. First, the vinegar footbath. Tradition holds that all new herders must dip their right foot in a bowl of warm vinegar, infused with parsley, rue, and an unfortunate amount of superstition. To humble the step, as the guild says. You've never questioned this. You do now. Especially as the onion grass chewer yelps, it tingles. Is it supposed to tingle? You nod solemnly. That's how you know the geese will respect you. Whether or not this is true remains hotly debated. Next, the feather riddle. This one is real. Each apprentice is handed a goose feather, randomly selected from the seasonal pile, and must answer a question based on its qualities. You draw the first feather. White-tipped, slightly curled, with a faint scent of rosemary. You ask, what does this feather say about the weather to come? The lopsided satchel herder squints at it. Rain, then clear skies, then slightly confused ducks. You nod. Acceptable. The second feather, black with copper streaks. You ask, where would this feather lead you if followed? The onion grass chewer frowns. Somewhere with stone soup and a very judgmental hedgehog. Classic answer, you say. We honor the hedgehog. Third feather, fluffy gray, oddly wide. You ask, what does this feather fear? The goat distracted herder bites her lip. Being forgotten. You pause. Then nod. Whisper honks once, very softly. Initiation complete. Almost. You gather the 3 initiates beneath the biggest willow. Reach into your cloak pouch. And produce the final test. A soft cloth bundle, unwrapped slowly to reveal a single goose egg, painted with red spirals and bound with a ring of thistle. They stare at it. You clear your throat. This is the egg of intent. One gasps. Another squints. Is it boiled? No, you say. They wait. You let the silence grow. Then continue. This egg has no powers. It will not hatch. It might smell if you keep it too long. But it's a symbol. A reminder that what we carry looks fragile, sounds silly, and is easily dropped. But it's what holds our path together. They nod slowly. One whispers, so, it's more like a metaphor. Exactly, you say. And if you forget that, the guild sends someone to recite poetry at you until you remember. They shudder. Fair. The sun filters through the trees as you hand over their sashes. Ceremonial cords dyed in onion skin yellow and nettle green. They drape them proudly over their shoulders, awkwardly, but proudly. And just like that, they're herders. Buttons trots forward and delivers each of them a firm, approving peck. Whisper stands in the background, watching. Always watching. You pack up. Say your farewells. And just as you're about to leave the clearing, something catches your eye. A stone. No, a stack of stones. Flat, circular, arranged in a spiral. At the base, pressed under a leaf, a small ribbon. Dark red. You nudge it with your boot. Underneath, a folded square of parchment. You open it. One line, the path winds tighter. The gander dreams again. You feel a strange chill, not cold exactly. More like echo. You pocket the note. Turn to the geese. Whisper meets your gaze. And without a word, he walks over to the spiral and pecks the center. Once. Then turns back. The ritual is done. The mystery deepens. You leave the clearing as the breeze picks up, rustling the leaves into a soft, spiraling hush. By the time you return to the field, the geese are already gathering. They sense it. The shift. The pull. The slow tightening of spirals you don't yet understand. But you will. Because now you're the goosekeep. You wear the helm. You carry the feather. You speak the riddles. And most importantly, you never walk alone. You return to camp just in time for the fair. Or, more precisely, the pre-fair panic, which is like the fair, only louder and with slightly more yelling about pastry placement. The village green is already halfway transformed, hay bales stacked into confusing configurations, canvas booths billowing like confused jellyfish, and at least 3 fiddlers all tuning in different keys. There's a pie judge chasing a chicken with an apron, and someone's left an unattended cheese wheel rolling toward the millpond. It's all very normal. And in the midst of it stands Rilda the baker, apron dusted in flour, brandishing a wooden spoon like a scepter. The ceremonial goose is missing, she says, without greeting. You blink. Wasn't it Button's last year? No, she snaps. Last year we used a gander decoy made from molasses and despair. It melted. You decide not to ask further. So this year a real one? You venture. Yes, she says. And he was due for grooming this morning, but the coop was open, and now he's gone. You scan the green. Dozens of villagers moving about. Stalls being raised. Barrels thumped into place. No sign of a goose and ceremonial ribbons. What did he look like? Plump, she says. Stern. Walked with a limp, like he knew more than he was telling. You look at Buttons. He snorts. No, you say. That's just how he always walks. But a thought tugs at the corner of your mind. You remember the red ribbon under the stone spiral. The whispered message, the gander dreams again. Could the ceremonial goose have wandered off on purpose? Or been taken? You leave Rilda to wrangle her donuts and set off toward the outer fields. The geese trail behind you, though a few peel off to inspect spilled barley near the grain tent. Whisper walks beside you, unusually quiet, as if pondering something beyond even his usual goose-level wisdom. You reach the hedgerow by the east pasture. It's quieter here. You kneel. Search the ground. There, a trail. Feather tufts. Faint tracks. And one pale ribbon caught on a thorn. Definitely ceremonial. You follow the trail. It winds through brush, past an abandoned wheelbarrow, and into the old orchard. The trees here are half dead, half wild, twisted like old ideas. And then you hear it. A faint honk. Low. Questioning. You press forward. There, beneath a crooked pear tree, is the missing goose. Tied to the base of the trunk with a silk ribbon, nibbling grumpily at a pile of slightly overripe pears. You crouch. There you are. He honks once. Not in relief. In annoyance? As you approach, you notice something odd. Etched into the bark above him is a spiral. Not a large one. Barely noticeable. But real. And fresh. You touch it. It's warm. Someone brought you here, you murmur. The goose honks again. And just behind you, a twig snaps. You spin. No one there. Just a flutter of leaves and a flicker of shadow moving deeper into the trees. You untie the ribbon, scoop up the ceremonial goose, who weighs approximately as much as a small haystack, and make your way back to the fair. You arrive just as the fiddle players agree on a key and the cabbage toss begins. Someone immediately dislocates their shoulder. Classic. Rilda sees you. Oh, thank heavens. He looks grumpy. He's deeply offended, you say. Also possibly in possession of ancient knowledge. She nods solemnly. That tracks. You pass the goose off for fluffing and rub your temples. Whisper appears beside you and drops a small object into your palm. A ribbon. Red. Not from the ceremonial goose. Another. Older. You glance at him. He stares back. And you understand. This wasn't just a prank or a fair day mishap. This was a message. You're being watched. Tested. Maybe by the same force that left the scrolls. Maybe by someone who once wore the goose keep helm and vanished into spiral silence. You shake the thoughts loose. There's a festival to survive. The midday procession begins with horns and bells and a goat inexplicably wearing a bonnet. The villagers cheer. Children throw herbs. The geese waddle proudly in formation, Mags leading, Clove bringing up the rear with a ceremonial braid someone clearly tied against her will. And Buttons? Buttons rides in a wheelbarrow, draped in gold tinsel, wearing a crown of daisies and looking extremely inconvenienced. You lead them through the square. Past the cider stands, the bread booths, the carved turnip judging panel. The crowd applauds politely. Someone offers you a roasted chestnut. You decline? Too busy watching the rooftops. Because you saw movement. Just a flicker. But enough. You break from the parade. Head down a side alley. It smells like soap and regret. You climb the narrow stairs to the bakery roof. No one there. Just pigeons. And a piece of parchment tucked beneath a loose tile. You unfold it. 3 spirals found. 4 remain. Guard the crown. Honor the plane. You frown. Crown? Plane? Before you can think further, a shout rises from below. You rush back down. Into chaos. The ceremonial goose is gone. Again. And this time, no pairs, no ribbons, no witnesses. Just a single feather. Laid perfectly in the middle of the square. And Whisper? Already moving. Fast. Following the trail. Buttons follows. You sigh. Then run. Because this isn't just mischief anymore. This is something older. And it has officially disrupted Goose Day. Which, frankly, is unacceptable. You follow the honks into the meadow beyond the fair, heart pounding, feathers flying, thoughts spiraling. And behind it all, a pattern emerging. A trail of feathers, tokens, spirals. Leading somewhere. You just don't know where yet. But you will. Because the geese trust you. The helm fits. And the spirals are tightening. You sprint across the meadow, cloak flapping like a very dramatic tablecloth, Whisper streaking ahead like a guided missile with feathers. Buttons bounds behind him, less elegant, more determined, his stubby legs launching from tuft to tuft with the unwavering resolve of someone chasing a lunch thief. The ceremonial goose is nowhere in sight. You pass the turnip booth, knock over a wheelbarrow full of daisy crowns, startle a minstrel into dropping their lute, and receive one shouted. From a man selling questionable pies. None of it matters. Your feet pound the earth. The fair shrinks behind you. And ahead, only honks and mystery. The trail leads past the hedgerow, into the thistle grove, across the old stone path where the ground dips just slightly, almost like footprints. Not goose prints. Boots. Human. You stop. Crouch. The prints are recent. Crisp edges. Not from the fair crowd. These boots aren't festival shoes. These are worn. Functional. And there's something else nearby, half buried beneath a patch of yarrow. You dig it out, a brass pin. Circular. Feathered design. Not gilt. Not abbey. You brush it clean. A faint inscription curves along the edge. Custodes Answerum. Goosekeepers. Plural. Your breath catches. All this time, you thought you were alone in this. The tokens, the riddles, the spirals, they pointed toward you. But what if there were others? What if this wasn't just a lineage, but an entire shadow network of keepers who'd gone silent? Or underground? Before you can spiral further into the spiral, Whisper honks sharply, once then twice. He's found something. You follow the sound to a small rise in the grass, barely visible. A hollow, really, shaped like a resting place. And there, lying in the middle of a precisely trampled patch of herbs, is the ceremonial goose. completely unharmed, looking mildly bored. And beside him? A folded sheet of parchment, weighted with a pebble and a single sprig of mint. You crouch and unfurl it. The ink is fresh. Test for the Honk heist. You followed the call. You saw the trail. But did you ask why the gander wandered? Underneath smaller print. Return him. Ask no questions yet. Keeper's still watching. Spiral remains. You look at the goose. He tilts his head. Looks at the note. Then pecks it once and sits down again like this was all an afternoon picnic he barely had time for. You lift him, carefully. He weighs slightly more than a disappointed melon. Whisper walks at your side, still tense. Buttons brings up the rear, occasionally honking at shadows just to remind everyone he's involved. The walk back to the fair is quiet. Except for the wind rustling in that way that makes grass whisper secrets you can almost hear if you're just a little more tired. You re-enter the village green mid-juggler's finale. No one notices at first. But when Rilda spots you, Goose in arms, a cheer goes up. Someone throws herbs. Buttons catches them mid-air. Rilda rushes over, eyes wide. He's safe. You nod. He went for a walk. She blinks. On his own? You shrug. You know how these ceremonial types are. She narrows her eyes but accepts it. You hand off the goose. He honks once in farewell. Or judgment. Hard to say. You find a quiet corner behind the cider tent and sit. Back against a barrel. Whisper settles beside you. Buttons flops over dramatically. And you think. You're being tested. But not for failure. For readiness. Each event, each spiral, each note, isn't trying to stop you. It's guiding you. Something is preparing you. To what end, though? That part remains maddeningly blank. You open your own ledger. Jot today's events. Add a sketch of the brass pin. Then pause. Because just as you start to close it, something odd catches your eye. Your ledger. There's a page at the back you've never seen before. Bound tight to the cover. You work it loose. It's old. Older than the rest. The ink faded but legible. Written in another hand, finer, curved, hurried. To the next. If you're reading this, the spirals have begun again. I don't know how long they'll test you. I only know they tested me too. You'll see signs. Hear the honks that don't echo. Trust the goose with the moon shadow eye. And whatever you do, don't eat the parsley in the northern grove. It's cursed. Tastes like socks. You sit back, stunned. Another keeper. One who used this very ledger. You flip the back cover. There, etched faintly, is that same sigil. The feather. The spiral. You run your fingers over it. Then look at Whisper. He gives you a long look. As if to say, we're not done. Not even close. The fair begins to wind down. The sun sinks low. A fiddler starts a sleepy reel. Children chase each other with half-melted sweets. Lanterns are lit. A small owl perches on the signpost, and hoots like it's judging everyone's grammar. And in the midst of it, you feel something shift. Not in the world. In you. You're no longer just a herder who accidentally stepped into a legend. You're the current bearer of a legacy, strange, quiet, riddled with feathers and root vegetables, but powerful. And it's clear now. The spirals don't appear to those who aren't ready to follow them. The ceremonial goose didn't run away. He knew where to be. And that means someone, something, is coordinating this from a level you've barely begun to understand. You reach into your pouch and withdraw the helm. Run your thumb along the carved edge. Whisper leans against you. Button snores, one leg twitching. And across the green, hidden in plain sight, someone watches. A figure in a hood. Standing still. Until you blink. And they're gone. But not forgotten. You close the ledger. Tomorrow, the fair will be packed away. The green will go quiet again. But the spiral? It turns. And now, you're at its center. You sleep that night with the helm beside your bedroll. Not on your head, too heavy, and frankly it smells faintly of linseed oil and dusty responsibilities. But close enough that if something creaks or honks in the dark, you can reach for it on instinct. The dreams come, as they always do now. But tonight they change. Gone are the usual spirals and riddle feathers. Instead, you're back at the fair. Only it's quiet, eerily so. Stalls half standing. Ribbons floating on wind with no source. In the middle of it all, a single goose. Not yours. Not one you've ever seen. Tall. Black-feathered. Eyes like polished stone. And around its neck, a chain bearing the guild seal, but twisted. Upside down. Inverted, like a question turned inside out. It opens its beak. But no honk comes out. Just silence. You wake with a start. Whisper is already awake, staring at the trees. Button snores on, one leg in the air. You sit up slowly. Dawn hasn't broken yet. But someone is moving at the edge of camp. You rise. Quiet as you can. Follow. No cloak. No lantern. Just you, the dark, and the sound of someone, or something, walking through the dew. You reach the northern path, where the grass crunches underfoot and the fog hangs low. The figure ahead moves carefully, deliberately. You follow. Past the berry hedges. Past the whispering ferns. And into the old market ruins. A place no one really talks about anymore. Once a thriving bazaar, now just moss-covered foundations and the occasional echo of forgotten bartering. Some say it burned in a lightning storm. Others say it was abandoned after a plague of mice tried to unionize. You step over a toppled arch. And there, in the center of the square, stands the figure. Hooded. Still. Waiting. You approach. But before you speak, they raise a hand. And toss something to the ground between you. A scroll. Wrapped in oilskin. You hesitate. Then pick it up. The figure nods once. Then disappears behind the broken colonnade before you can say a word. You unroll the scroll. Inside. Spiral 5, winged whispers. You are ready for the courier's burden. Meet us at market's edge at moonrise. Bring no one but the goose that listens. Speak only when spoken to. And leave no feathers behind. You stare at the message. Then back the way you came. A courier's burden? You've carried geese, yes. But secrets? That's new. You return to camp, scroll tucked in your belt. Whisper meets your eyes. No honk. Just understanding. You nod. He follows you back to the fire, where Buttons has stolen someone's slipper and refuses to give it back. Moonrise can't come soon enough. By dusk, you've prepared a small satchel with essentials, the helm, the ledger, a wedge of sharp cheese, and an emergency onion. You wear your plainest cloak. Leave a note for Buttons, who promptly eats it, and head off with Whisper into the growing shadows. The old market's edge is even quieter at night. No wind. No owls. Just the occasional creak of the earth remembering it once held laughter. And then, you hear them. Voices. Soft. Purposeful. You step into the archway clearing. There are 5 of them. All cloaked. All masked. Each with a different sigil stitched onto their left shoulder. A feather, a spiral, a moon, a crooked staff, and a goose print. One steps forward. Their voice is low. You answered the 5th call. You nod. I did. Do you accept the burden? You glance at Whisper. He nods once. I do. They hand you a pouch. Inside, a tiny carved goose made of stone. Heavy. Cold. It hums faintly in your palm. This is the token, the masked figure says. It must reach the hollow archive before the next equinox. You pause. Where is the hollow archive? Their head tilts. You'll know when it's too late to turn around. Classic spiral logic. You suppress a sigh. Very well. They gesture again. Another figure steps forward, handing you a folded cloth map. It's blank. You squint. Then tilt it in the moonlight. And there, faint lines appear. Ink made of something secret. paths spiderwebbing outward from the ruins, all converging on a mark shaped like a goose egg surrounded by spirals. You're not alone, the voice continues. Others walk the same path. But your goose listens truest. Whisper, ever modest, preens a bit. One of the other figures chuckles softly. Then silence. The masked figures begin to retreat. But the first one stops. Turns. Says, mind the broken spiral. It deceives by symmetry. And then they're gone. Just you, Whisper, the token, and a blankish map. You head home slowly. Carefully. Thinking. So many pieces. So many layers. And this is only Spiral 5. What were the first 4? The bells? The scrolls? The riddled footbaths? You laugh once quietly. Then remember the part about leave no feathers behind. You glance at the ground. Find one. Gray. Still warm. You pluck it from the moss, tuck it into your ledger, and walk home. Moonlight guiding you. Map humming softly in your satchel. Whisper beside you. And the token, quiet for now. Waiting. Morning arrives far too soon for someone who may now be an unofficial Inter-Kingdom courier of goose-shaped relics. You wake with the taste of mint on your tongue and a vague memory of a masked person telling you not to trust the symmetrical spiral. Which, frankly, is the kind of advice you wish came with a diagram and maybe a snack. Whisper is already awake, standing atop your empty satchel like he's guarding a national treasure. Which, to be fair, he is. You stretch. Check the pouch. The carved stone goose is still there, cool and solid. Still humming faintly, though whether that's magical energy or your own nerves is hard to say. Button snores beside the fire, one foot twitching as if he's chasing someone in his dreams. Possibly a beat. You pack quickly, review the moon map again, and consider your options. But before you can take more than 2 steps toward heroic spiral messenger action, Rilda appears out of nowhere with flour on her sleeve and a wild look in her eyes. There's a problem, she says. There's always a problem, you mutter, but politely. She doesn't even pause. It's the Duchess. She's arrived early. And she's brought the gilded goose. You stare. The what now? The gilded goose, she repeats. It's tradition. She brings it to the mid-harvest banquet. Except this year, it's more gilded than usual. You raise an eyebrow. How more? Rilda sighs, exasperated. It's covered in edible gold. Completely. It looks like a candied sun. You blink. And she insists on parading it through the village. You pinch the bridge of your nose. Of course. You were just handed a potentially magical stone goose that might lead to a long-lost archive and a cryptic goose cult. And now you're supposed to compete with a glittery poultry peacock. You follow Rilda back to the square, where villagers are gathering in cautious fascination. And there it is. The gilded goose. Carried in a velvet-lined basket by 2 very nervous footmen, its entire feathered form is shimmering with golden flakes. A delicate tiara rests on its head. Its eyes are narrowed in what can only be described as deeply aristocratic judgment. The Duchess stands beside it, wearing at least 3 kinds of lace and a smile so practiced it deserves its own rehearsal schedule. Ah, she says when she sees you. The goose keep. You're not sure how she knows. You're also not sure you like the way she says it, like you're a novelty, a curiosity, perhaps one step above a well-trained goat. You bow slightly. Your Grace. I trust the village has prepared its humble festivities? She asks, like someone politely inquiring whether the outhouse has been scrubbed. You nod. As ever. She gestures to the basket. Isn't she divine? We use saffron butter beneath the gold leaf. And a touch of cinnamon oil. You eye the goose. She glares at you. You say, diplomatically she looks flammable. The Duchess laughs. Oh, darling. It's pageantry. She turns to the crowd. Let the procession begin. Music starts. Some kind of lute fanfare played a half-step too sharp, and the gilded goose is borne forward like poultry royalty. Whisper and Buttons appear at your side. Whisper honks once, low and unimpressed. Buttons just starts walking. toward the golden bird. Rilda steps into place beside you. You think it's dangerous? The goose? No, you say. The timing. Why arrive early? Why gild it so thoroughly? Why now? She frowns. Do you think she knows about the spiral? I think, you say slowly, that she may know something. You follow the parade at a distance, keeping your eyes on the Duchess's retinue. 3 guards. 1 cart full of wine casks. And a suspiciously well-fed jester who keeps slipping away to pet dogs and whisper into tree trunks. You stop when they reach the banquet green. The Duchess takes the stage. The gilded goose is lifted onto a pedestal, framed by velvet curtains and enough candles to violate at least 3 fire ordinances. You make your way through the crowd until you find a shadowed spot beneath the refreshment tent. There, sitting casually on a crate of cider bottles, is the jester. You nod to him. He nods back. Nice feathers, he says. You glance down. One of Whisper's molted down feathers clings to your cloak. You brush it off. Thanks. He leans forward. In the mood for a riddle? Always. He smiles, a little too widely. What has wings, wears gold, but isn't free? You frown. The gilded goose? Wrong, he says. It's you. Before you can respond, he drops a folded card into your hand and vanishes into the crowd. You open it. Spiral 6 begins at sundown. Follow the crumbs. Trust the beak that points, not the one that speaks. You look up. The gilded goose squawks. Loudly. Then, deliberately, pecks the pedestal. Once. Twice. Then shifts slightly to one side, peering at something behind the curtain. You follow her gaze. Behind the stage, half hidden in the grass, lies a trail of small white stones. And among them, a single gold feather. You glance at Whisper. He nods. Buttons rolls his eyes. Rilda mutters, every year, it's something. You wait until the Duchess begins her speech, about harvests, about heritage, about the delicate balance of sugar and symbolism, then slip around the side of the stage. You follow the stones. One by one. Down the hill. Past the apple carts. Into the woods. At the edge of a clearing you stop. There, in the center of the grass, lies another scroll. And beside it, a circle of feathers, gray, gold, and one black as pitch. You kneel. Open the scroll. You've seen the gilded lie. Now seek the goose that never shines. Beyond the shimmer lies the truth. The archive opens only to those who know the weight of glitter. You sit back. Think. The Duchess brought the gilded goose here to dazzle. To distract. But why? To draw attention? Or to hide something? The spiral turns. And you're still following. Whisper steps into the feather circle. Honks once. And the wind picks up. Just slightly. Carrying with it the scent of old books, cool stone. And roasted pears? You squint. Because that, oddly, smells like the hollow archive. And you haven't even left the woods yet. You linger in the feather ring. It's quiet here, not eerie, but hushed, like the trees are listening in. Even the wind seems to step carefully. Whisper noses the scroll again, then gives you a meaningful look that says, in clear goose-keep language, it's time. You nod, gather the feathers, gray, gold, black, and tuck them into your ledger. They crunch faintly, like dry leaves holding secrets. Then you take a breath. And step beyond the ring. The trail shifts immediately. No more obvious stones or breadcrumbs. Just instinct. And smell. You follow the scent of roasted pears, of all things, a mixture of sugar, smoke, and something older something. Papery. The forest canopy closes above you. Sunlight becomes streaky, shy. Whisper moves ahead with quiet certainty. Buttons trails behind, stopping occasionally to investigate a suspicious stick, or sit dramatically because his legs are tired. He's not built for espionage, you remind yourself, he's built for decorative waddling and last-minute snack raids. Eventually, the trees give way to a hollow. A true one. Not a sinkhole or cave, but a natural amphitheater of sorts, where the ground dips down and the air feels cooler. In the center, half buried in moss and ivy, is a squat stone structure. Round domed, with a single archway just barely visible. You approach slowly. There's no door. Just darkness. And just inside the entrance, a goose. Not gilded. Not ceremonial. Just a regular-looking, slightly tired goose. It watches you, then steps aside. Like it's been waiting. Whisper honks softly. Buttons lets out a long-suffering sigh. And you enter the hollow archive. The interior smells like thyme, chalk, and wet feathers. Shelves rise from the floor in organic spirals, stone fused with wood, carved to resemble curling wings. Scrolls, bound ledgers, and bizarre contraptions fill every crevice. Some spin when you pass. Others blink. Literally blink. You don't question it. At the center of the archive sits a pedestal. Not grand, not glowing. Just present. You step toward it and place the carved stone goose on its surface. It fits. Of course it does. And when you release it, the room shifts. There's a soft hum. A flicker. Then a panel in the far wall shudders and opens. A narrow passage leads downward, lit by bioluminescent moss and, inexplicably, faintly glowing breadcrumbs embedded in the floor. Someone had a sense of humor. You descend. It feels like hours, though you know it's only minutes. You emerge into a chamber that feels more like a nest than a room. Curved walls, lined with parchment nests. In the center, a table carved from a single branch, bent into spiral form. Sitting at that table, a woman. Elderly. Hair white and soft as down. She wears a cloak the color of overripe pears, and her eyes are closed. You clear your throat. She speaks without opening them. You followed the crumbs. I did. You trusted the beak that points. I think so. She opens one eye. Peers at you. You didn't eat the gold feather, did you? Should I have? She smiles. Trick question. You shift uncomfortably. She gestures. You sit across from her. Whisper hops onto the table and immediately finds a warm spot. Button sniffs the parchment nest, curls up, and begins snoring. The woman leans forward. So, you've reached Spiral 7. You blink. Already? She chuckles. It speeds up after the market. What happens now? She taps the table. And a small drawer pops open. Inside, a vial of goose oil, a single dried fig, and a page torn from a cookbook titled Recipes for the Slightly Magical. You accept them without question. Instructions? You ask. She nods toward the fig. Eat that when the moon is exactly half full. The oil goes on the helm. The recipe page, just don't lose it. You nod. What is this place? She sighs, long and slow. This is what remains of the original guild. Before it was split, before the spirals scattered. We were librarians. Stewards. Goose-minded archivists. She looks at you. And storytellers? You raise an eyebrow. Storytellers? Every spiral, she says, is a story. A test wrapped in tale. It's how we preserve the wisdom, by disguising it as nonsense. Because no one ever guards the absurd. You sit with that. It makes sense. Sort of. You glance around the chamber again. So what happens when I reach the final spiral? She closes her eyes again. That's the question, isn't it? Very helpful. You rise, gently pocket the items, and whisper your thanks. She raises one hand, beckons you close. You lean in. She presses a kiss to your forehead that smells faintly of sage and ink. You've done well, she whispers. But it gets sillier from here. You nod. Of course it does. You leave the archive the way you came, through the tunnel, past the blinking scrolls, past the very smug-looking goose by the door, and back into the forest clearing. It's dusk again. Time folds strangely inside the archive. Whisper stretches. Buttons is covered in dust and 2 new burrs. You turn toward home. As you reach the first ridge, something catches your eye. A mark in the dirt. A spiral. Broken. Symmetrical. Perfect. You freeze. Remember the warning. Mind the broken spiral. It deceives by symmetry. You approach it carefully. Around the edge of the spiral are feathers. Identical. Too identical. You reach down to pick one up, and it dissolves into ash. So do the rest. A trap. A test? A message? You step back. A chill runs through you. The spirals are no longer just stories. They're watching you now. And not just with riddles, but with purpose. You don't sleep that night. Not because you're afraid, though, let's be honest, any spiral that dissolves its own decoy feathers is at least mildly alarming. But because something about that broken, too perfect spiral keeps needling at your thoughts like a poorly stitched seam. Whisper dozes by the fire. Buttons is using your emergency socks as a pillow. You sit with the helm in your lap, tracing the ridges with your thumb, wondering what comes next. Then, just after the moon slips behind a cloud, someone knocks on your cottage door. Once. Then again, twice. Light, polite, like whoever's outside knows you don't answer the door for just anything. Not unless they bring jam or riddles. You open it, and find three things. A parchment sealed with wax in the shape of a goose bill. A small sack of barley. A man in formal robes carrying a scroll so large it needs wheels. He bows stiffly. You are hereby summoned, he says, to act as expert witness in the matter of the honking of Master Ambrose's prized turnip patch. You blink. The what now? He clears his throat. There was an incident. A goose was involved. Possibly several geese. One wore what appeared to be a cravat. You nod slowly. So, naturally, I'm to testify. Indeed, he says. Tomorrow. First bell. Village Square. Don't forget your helm. Of course. You watch him leave, scroll rattling behind him like an ill-advised parade. You turn back to the parchment, and break the seal. Inside, written in a rushed, uneven hand. This trial is not what it seems. The accuser walks with painted steps. Listen for the triple cough. And bring the feathered witness. You read it 3 times. Then look at Whisper. He opens one eye. Sighs. Then starts sharpening his beak on your doorframe like a knight oiling his sword. The next morning dawns cool and damp. The sort of air that carries gossip and breadcrumbs equally well. You dress in layers, nothing flashy, just enough to look competent in front of a tribunal. You tuck the scroll from the archive into your belt, just in case, slide the helm over your head, and usher Whisper and Buttons into formation. The square is buzzing. Benches have been set up. Bunting flaps in the breeze. And a very stern-looking woman in robes is arranging colored stones on a table. You recognize the accused at once. It's Clove. She's sitting in a wooden crate, flanked by 2 guards, looking aggressively unrepentant. She has a piece of cabbage in her beak and a twinkle in her eye that says she would absolutely do it again. The accuser, presumably Master Ambrose, stands nearby with grass stains on his knees and several feathers in his beard. Suspicious. The trial begins with the reading of the charges. On the 27th of last sun, the goose known as Clove, in association with unnamed co-conspirators, did unlawfully trample, honk upon, and deface property belonging to Master Ambrose, specifically his prize-winning turnip patch. Damages include 1 cracked turnip trophy, emotional distress, and 2 unusable wheelbarrows. Whisper snorts softly. Buttons is already asleep. You're called to testify. You rise. Step into the circle. The tribunal leader peers over her glasses. Goosekeep, do you have knowledge of Clove's behavior on the date in question? You pause dramatically. Yes, you say, but I believe this trial has a deeper purpose. A murmur. Someone drops a meat pie. You continue. I received a note, you say. An anonymous warning. It claimed the accuser walks with painted steps. That this trial is not what it seems. Ambrose scoffs. Ridiculous. You raise an eyebrow. Then may we examine your boots? The tribunal nods. Permit the check. Ambrose hesitates. Aye, these are personal property. Whisper moves forward. Pecks at one boot. It squeaks. The tribunal gasps. You kneel and press your fingers to the sole. Then lift it to the light. Red paint. Fresh. Not farm paint, you say. Parade paint. You reach into your satchel and produce the feather circle from the archive woods. This spiral was found outside the banquet green 2 nights ago, you say. Someone has been following me. Setting traps. Sending geese where they don't belong. Clove honks indignantly. You nod. Not her. But someone used her likeness. A decoy. Another gasp. The tribunal leader frowns. Master Ambrose, explain the paint. He wilts. I needed attention. The fair didn't include my pickled beet sculptures this year. I thought, if I staged a goose attack, people would care again. Buttons wakes up just to roll his eyes. You step back as the tribunal confers. Clove is released. She struts out of the crate with her head high, and steals someone's biscuit on the way. The tribunal issues a formal apology to the Goose Guild. And you? You retrieve the scroll from your belt. Show it to the leader. She frowns. This mark. That's from the Hollow Archive. You nod. So it's true, she murmurs. The spirals are active again. She leans closer. Keep your helm close, Goosekeep. The next trial won't be so obvious. And with that, the trial concludes. The crowd disperses. Whisper pecks Ambrose once on the ankle for good measure. You return to your cottage and find a small box sitting on your doorstep. No note. Inside, a black feather, a piece of chalk, and a miniature stone spiral. You chalk the spiral on your windowsill. Hold the feather to the light. It doesn't dissolve. Instead, it glows faintly at the tip. You close your eyes. And hear, ever so faintly, a triple cough echo in your mind. You open your eyes. It's begun again. The next morning, you awaken to the sound of someone whistling Greensleeves outside your window. This would not be so strange if the someone in question were not a goose. You sit up slowly, peer out the shutters, and sure enough, there's a goose wearing a blue ribbon around its neck, pacing back and forth and occasionally pausing to whistle tunefully through its beak. Whisper watches from the windowsill, head cocked, eyes narrowed. You rise, groaning as you stretch, and head to the door. The moment you open it, the whistling stops. The goose freezes, stares at you for a full, awkward beat, then produces a small scroll from beneath its wing. It waddles forward, drops the scroll at your feet, and turns tail into the hedgerow, honking once with what you can only describe as theatrical finality. You blink. Whisper exhales. Buttons, from beneath a blanket, mutters, "Tell it I'm not buying anything." You ignore him. The scroll bears no seal, only a line of symbols at the bottom, a spiral with a goose track cutting through it. Inside, written in tight, urgent handwriting. The truce between herders has been violated. A gander has been taken. Meet at Hollow Oak by twilight. Wear your helm. Bring the onion. You frown. Of course it's that onion. The one you've been carrying for 6 spirals now, still inexplicably firm and slightly luminous under moonlight. You make tea, think carefully, and double knot your cloak. A herder truce? You'd heard rumors, long ago, quiet mutterings at guild meetings, mentions of secret exchanges and annual goose stares in neutral pastures. But you'd always assumed they were more ceremonial than literal. If a gander's gone missing and that old pact is in question, the spiral just twisted a little tighter. You set off at mid-afternoon. The Hollow Oak isn't far, but protocol demands a detour through the cracked garden, a stonework labyrinth maintained by retired scribes who believe geometry keeps the geese calm. You walk slowly. Pass odd statues, one of a gander holding a staff, one of a feather curling into a moon. Each time you glance away, you swear the statues shift position slightly, as if stretching when unobserved. Whisper hums. Buttons keeps pace with a limp that's only dramatic when someone's watching. At last, the Hollow Oak. It rises from the ground like a petrified question mark, twisted trunk, hollow center, and roots like reaching fingers. Within its natural chamber, 5 figures wait, standing in a circle. Each wears a cloak. Each bears a feather of different hue tucked behind one ear. One steps forward as you approach. You recognize her immediately, Elia, the red marsh herder. Keeper of the Whispering Pond geese and inventor of the puddle-to-purse migration strategy. Her voice is low. You receive the whistle. You nod. Wasn't expecting the musical delivery. A brief smile. Not my idea. Voro insisted. Said it builds anticipation. A second figure, Voro, wide-shouldered and forever dusted in hay, grunts in agreement. His goose is asleep at his feet, wearing a monocle for reasons that are never explained. Ilya continues. One of ours has been taken. A black gander, ring-marked, trained in silent messaging. You blink. That's not subtle. No, she agrees. And now, the truce is in question. A third figure, small and sharp-eyed, steps forward. We think it was an inside job. You glance between them. Why call me? Ilya nods to your belt. Because you carry the spiral. And because the onion speaks. You frown. I've had this onion for months. It has never spoken. Have you asked nicely? That shuts you up. Whisper snorts. You retrieve the onion. Hold it up. It glows faintly, then hums. Everyone steps back. The smallest herder bows. The witness is valid. You blink again. Wait, you really expected this onion to talk? They all nod solemnly. Ilya gestures toward the tree trunk. An old map lies there, etched into bark. You recognize the shapes, the goose territories. Marshes, fields, shared grounds. At the center, marked with an X, is a spot labeled the Silent Nest. Ilya speaks again. The missing gander was last seen here. You step forward. Tap the spot. And we're going? She shakes her head. You're going. With him. She points to a figure you hadn't noticed before, sitting quietly in the tree's shadow. He rises slowly. A herder you've never seen. Tall, robed in ash-colored cloth, with one sleeve pinned where his arm should be. His remaining hand is gloved in what appears to be goose leather, tastefully done, but still unnerving. He speaks in a voice like dry parchment. I am Thorn. You nod. Right. He eyes the onion. Then you. Then whispers, do you have biscuits? You don't. He sighs. We go anyway. You turn to Ilya. Anything else I should know? She hesitates. There may be a trap. The spiral is growing more literal. Thorn chuckles. You leave the hollow oak just as the sky begins to purple, Thorn beside you, Whisper leading the way. Buttons trails behind, muttering something about never trusting vegetables with a glow. The path twists sharply toward the silent nest. The forest narrows. The ground softens. And somewhere overhead, geese fly in formation, only to vanish behind a shimmer in the air. Illusion? Protection? Trap? Probably yes to all. You reach a clearing. Nothing moves. Then Thorn kneels. Presses his gloved hand to the ground. Whispers they were here. All 5. Carried something heavy. You scan the brush. Catch the edge of a feather, black, rimmed in silver. Whisper snatches it, honks once. Then from the trees, movement. 3 figures. Hooded. One holds the black gander. Bound but not harmed. They stop at the edge of the light. The lead figure speaks. The spiral turns. You respond instinctively. And we follow. He nods. Then tosses a scroll. It lands at your feet. You open it. Inside. To reclaim the gander, name the truce that bound us. Speak it whole. Speak it true. Or the pact breaks forever. You glance at Thorn. He nods. Steps forward. Clears his throat. And begins to recite. Thorn's voice rings out across the clearing, not loudly, but with the soft confidence of someone repeating something memorized long ago, perhaps under their breath in a field of reeds while geese nested nearby. He speaks in an old dialect. Not quite Latin. Not quite French. Something older, farm-soaked and scribe-smudged, like someone tried to spell solemnity using hay and a very sleepy duck. By feather, field, and untrampled root. By beak unbroken and wing unsinged. Let no herder strike nor goose be taken. Between moon's rise and morning's steam. In mud we walk, in wind we guide. But packed we hold till bread goes dry. There's a moment of absolute stillness. Then the figures at the edge of the clearing exhale in unison. The leader lowers his hood. Reveals a face you hadn't expected. It's Marlowe. Former guild apprentice. Last seen failing the initiation riddle about spiral logic and turnip preservation, then dramatically storming off with a quill between his teeth and declaring he would rewrite the Goose doctrine from scratch. You hadn't expected him to succeed. And you certainly hadn't expected him to return years later with a rogue gander and a flair for shadow theatrics. Marlowe, you say, half bewildered, half impressed. He bows. Goose keep. You faked a kidnapping to test the spiral? To reset it, he replies. The truce was decaying. Forgotten. I needed to remind the guild what mattered. You could have just written a letter. He grins. But then I wouldn't have gotten to recite poetry in the woods, would I? You sigh. I suppose this means the truce holds? He nods. For now. But the spirals are tightening. We need everyone alert. Even Buttons. Buttons, who has been aggressively grooming his tail feathers, looks up at the sound of his name, glares, and resumes licking his foot. You turn back to Thorn. He seems calm. Too calm. You narrow your eyes. Wait a minute. You knew it was Marlowe, didn't you? He shrugs, one-armed and infuriating. Didn't want to spoil the ending. You mutter something impolite about dramatic herders, then step toward the black gander. He eyes you with practiced suspicion, but lets you undo the twine. His feathers are sleek. His left wing bears a mark, a double spiral, mirrored. You pause. Mirrored spirals usually meant duplication. Division. Where did you find him? You ask Marlowe. In the Withering Meadow, he says. Near the forgotten scriptorium. You shiver. The Withering Meadow had been sealed in spiral lore as a place where riddles went to rot, and overly ambitious metaphors became literal. You examine the gander's feathers. Hidden beneath them is something small and heavy. A coin. But not a coin. It's carved into the shape of a goose's eye, with tiny spiral ridges that shimmer when tilted. You hold it up. Thorn leans in. That's not archive issued. Marlowe frowns. I didn't place it there. The gander shifts. Whispers. You blink. He just whispered. No honk. No hiss. Just one perfectly formed word. 8. Thorn steps back. Spiral 8. You nod slowly. A marker. Not placed by Marlowe. Something older. Or newer. You slip the coin into your satchel, next to the still glowing onion and that tiny fig you've sworn you'll only eat when told. Marlowe gestures to his companions. They melt back into the woods, not vanishing so much as choosing not to be seen. You and Thorn begin the walk home, the black gander now trotting beside you like he owns the path. You think this was really just about resetting the truce? You ask Thorn. He grunts. Partly. But also a test. For you. For me? The spirals have always chosen. That's comforting. He shrugs. You didn't eat the gold feather. That counts for something. You trudge on in silence for a while. The trees shift. The wind grows a little bolder. You feel the weight of the spiral coin in your bag, like a heartbeat that doesn't quite match your own. When you finally reach the edge of the Goose territories, something feels off. Not wrong. Just bent. Like a map with an extra fold. The stone boundary marker at the fork in the path has changed. It no longer says North Marsh and Library Glen. Now one side reads, Spiral 8, begin where the circle broke. You stare at it. And realize you know where that is. The market ruins. The place where the first spiral map was given. Where someone had drawn a broken spiral. Too symmetrical. Deceptive. You look at Thorn. He nods once, then turns down the opposite path without a word. You suspect you'll see him again. Whisper flaps once. Buttons flops into the grass. And you? You take the new path. Back toward the ruins. Back to where the circle broke. You arrive as the moon climbs. The stones look the same. But in the center of the square, someone has laid out feathers in a new pattern, 8 spirals overlapping. And in the middle, a bowl. Simple. Stone. Filled with water and one floating object, a single crumb. You approach. Lean in. Your reflection stares back. Then twists. Becomes a goose. Becomes the spiral. Becomes nothing at all. You blink. The bowl is empty. The crumb is gone. But behind you. A whisper. Not from whisper. Just sound. Wind. Voice. The spiral has spoken. And it's not through yet. You sleep in the ruins that night. Not out of bravery, or even laziness, but because after the spiral bowl tricked your reflection into becoming a goose, your legs gave out and Buttons sat on your chest until you rested your aura. His words, not yours. So you curl under a half-broken market stall, your cloak drawn tight, the satchel nestled against your ribs. Whisper watches from the stone ledge where the spiral had been drawn, his eyes reflecting the moon like twin breadcrumbs. You wake before dawn. Your head feels full of straw and haiku. The spiral dreams again. This time you're arguing with a tax goose over plum pricing, and somehow losing. You shake it off. And that's when you see him. A shape. Just past the square. Waddling through the mist. Alone. Confident. Dark feathers edged with silver. An unmistakable posture. It's him. The black-beaked one. The gander from the oldest stories. The one who vanished during the collapse of the third spiral. The one who was supposed to be lost to time, to shadow, or to an incident involving ill-tempered cinnamon geese. He pauses. Turns his head slightly. You lock eyes. And feel something shift. Not magical lightning. Not a beam of divine insight. Just the slow turning of a page. The black-beaked one waits. Whisper is already on his feet. Buttons snores obliviously. You rise. Approach slowly. Carefully. And he doesn't flee. Instead, he begins to walk. Leading you, calmly, deliberately, out of the ruins and toward the old forest path that curves like a question mark and ends, legend says, at the spiral root itself. You follow without thinking. Because when a goose that's supposed to be extinct shows up during your spiral trial, you don't argue. You pack. Whisper takes the lead. Buttons finally stirs and grumbles something about unjust mornings. And the 4 of you descend into the fog-soaked path lined with mushrooms that look like eyebrows and trees that look suspiciously like sleeping librarians. After what feels like hours, but could be minutes, because spiral time is famously unreliable, you reach a glade. At the center, a tree stump. Plain. Circular. Flat-topped. It hums softly. The black-beaked one hops onto it. Turns once. Then honks. Twice. And you feel a pulse through the soles of your boots. The spiral root is awake. You approach. A panel on the stump opens. Inside, parchment, soft and brittle with age, bound in twine made from braided down. You reach in. The black-beaked one honks again, lower this time. Like a reminder. You lift the parchment. Unroll it. It's not a map. Not quite. It's a plan. An architectural sketch of something circular and grand. Spiral halls. Feather libraries. A nest-shaped observatory. Annotations scrawled in multiple hands. The spiral keep. The original guild headquarters. Lost in the great feathering. You turn the parchment over. And there, tucked in the corner, is a line of text. Written in the unmistakable hand of Elder Herder Ellsworth, known lover of riddles and peppermint pastilles. If you're reading this, the keep still dreams. But beware the reflecting pool. Not all spirals show the truth. You whisper the words aloud. The black-beaked one dips his head. And beside the stump, the ground begins to shift. Slowly, a stone spiral rises, etched with symbols. You recognize the eighth. It glows faintly. Waiting. You press the onion to it. The onion you've carried for 7 spirals. The one that refuses to rot. The one Buttons once tried to name. The spiral accepts it. There's a hum. A soft snap. And the stump lowers into the ground, revealing a staircase lit by floating orbs that smell of parchment and time. You descend. At the bottom, a round chamber. The ceiling carved with constellations shaped like feathers, spoons, and one suspiciously accurate rendition of a napping Buttons. In the center, a table. On it 8 objects. Each from your journey. The first feather you found. The scroll from the trial. The broken spiral stone. The coin shaped like an eye. The fig from the archive. The parchment with the truce. A single gold flake from the Duchess's goose. And, sitting in the middle? A reflection pool. You hesitate. Because Elswitha's warning rings in your ears. Not all spirals show the truth. You look into the pool. It doesn't reflect you. It shows geese. Hundreds. Marching in formation. A feathered army. Not attacking, but delivering scrolls. Fixing fences. Planting crops. Teaching. Rebuilding. It's not a warning. It's a memory. Or maybe a blueprint. Beside the pool, etched into the stone, a final instruction. Spiral 9 awakens only through trust. Place your helm in the pool. Step back. Do not look again until dawn. You hesitate. But trust, as always, is the most ridiculous and essential part of the spiral. You remove your helm. Hold it for a beat. Then gently lower it into the pool. It floats. Spins. Then sinks. No ripple. You step back. Whisper sighs. Buttons yawns. And the black-beaked one hops onto your foot and rests there. Together you wait. The spiral turns. You don't sleep. Not fully. You just rest. Your back against the chamber wall, eyes somewhere between open and closed. It's a new kind of awareness, like dreaming while watching your own dream from the next room. The reflection pool glows faintly across from you, its surface as still as syrup left too long in the sun. Your helm is gone beneath it. And you're not sure if it's floating in water or memory or something stranger, but the pool hums softly, like it's thinking. Or digesting. Whisper is curled beside you, beak tucked under wing. Buttons has somehow acquired a very small pillow. And the black-beaked one remains perfectly upright, still perched on your foot like a statue, or a particularly judgmental slipper. Time here is not like time above. There's no ticking. No light shifting. No breeze. Just the weight of possibility pressing gently on your shoulders like a blanket woven of unfinished sentences. Then dawn. Not the kind with light and birdsong, but the spiral kind. A ripple in the reflection pool. A soft, golden glow spreading through the etched constellations overhead. And a sound. One single honk. Not whisper. Not Buttons. The pool itself. It honks. And you know, without knowing how, that spiral 9 has begun. You stand. The water shimmers. Your helm rises from the pool, slowly, gracefully, now changed. It gleams softly, its surface etched with tiny spirals, not engraved but grown, like moss choosing where to root. You lift it. It's lighter than before. Warmer. And as you lower it onto your head, something settles into place, not just the helmet, but the weight of the last 9 spirals. Their lessons, their laughter, the goose-scented chaos of it all. A breeze picks up inside the chamber, despite the absence of windows. You glance around. And there, where the 8 objects had sat before, lies a single folded paper. You pick it up. Inside. Spiral 10, you are the spiral now. The trial continues through you. Return to the fields. Ask nothing. Carry everything. Begin with breakfast. You chuckle. Of course it ends with breakfast. Or begins again with it. Same difference in spiral logic. You gather your things. The parchment. The glowing onion. The spiral coin. The figure. Still not eaten. Still looking smug. And the goose-braided satchel that's somehow held up through this entire epic like the unsung hero it is. The chamber opens behind you, revealing a spiral staircase winding upward into daylight. You walk. Each step echoes slightly. Whisper pads behind you. Buttons mutters, if this spiral involves yoga, I'm staying home. You emerge into a field. Not your field. Not any you've walked before. But familiar somehow. Wheat stalks tall enough to hide a particularly dramatic goose. Sky wide and blinking with soft morning. In the center of the field is a table. Set for one. With tea. A soft boiled egg. A piece of toast shaped like a spiral. And a note. Well done, Goosekeep. Please enjoy this breakfast. Then report to the barn. You sit. You eat. The egg is seasoned with something ancient and comforting. The tea is thyme and honey, and something oddly like sage advice. The toast crunches with satisfaction. You finish every bite. Whisper waits politely. Button steals the corner of toast, crunches loudly, then burps into the wind. You stand. The barn is exactly where the note promised, about 40 paces north, past a goose-sized obstacle course made of tiny hurdles, tunnels, and one rotating platform for advanced waddling maneuvers. Inside, the barn is quiet. Sunlight through slats. Hay piled with architectural intent. And, in the center, a lectern. A figure stands behind it. Old. Cloaked. Bearded, yes, but with feathers in it like he's lost several arguments with affectionate geese. He doesn't look up. Just gestures. You approach. He clears his throat. You've walked the 9. You nod. You've passed the 5th and 7th spirals unscorched? Mostly. And you have not, at any point, impersonated a herder while under the influence of goose oil? That only happened once. He smiles faintly. Then finally looks up. You recognize him. Master Quelth. Guild historian. Chronicler of spiral lore. Former competitive ribbon-tying champion, junior division, but still. I thought you were retired, you say. I am, he replies. But the spirals have a way of knocking. He points to your satchel. The fig? You hand it over. He inspects it. Sniffs it. Nods. Still viable. Good. That'll help. He turns. Reveals a large scroll behind him. Blank. Now, he says, your next duty begins. You tilt your head. Quelth unfurls the scroll. Ink blooms across it, slowly, gently, forming the shape of a spiral. At its center, your name. At its edge, nothing. You are to write the next spiral, he says. You blink. But I barely understood this one. Precisely, he replies. Which is why you'll make an excellent author. You stare. Whisper bumps your leg. Button sits on your foot and refuses to move. Quelth hands you a quill. Spiral 10 begins with a single stroke, he says. Don't make it too clever. You take the quill. Hesitate. Then press the tip to the parchment. And write. Spiral 10, in which the Goosekeep is surprised to learn they are also a librarian, a diplomat, a part-time baker, and apparently a rather effective chaos wrangler. The ink spreads. More text flows after it, not from your hand, but drawn out by the spiral's magic. It begins to write itself, building on your tone, your jokes, your confusion and curiosity and affection for ridiculous geese with very clear boundaries and opinions about hat etiquette. You step back. Quelth nods. The spiral continues. The next trial begins. And you? You head back outside. Because the path loops forward. And Whisper has already started walking. You walk. Not with urgency, not anymore. The spirals have done their winding. You, in return, have done your fair share of honking, guessing, theorizing, mildly panicking, and eating oddly metaphysical toast. Now, with Spiral 10 unfolding somewhere behind you like a map that writes itself in rhyming couplets, you do the only thing a true Goosekeep can do. You go home. Or at least, toward the version of home that involves a half-repaired cottage, one functional kettle, and a footpath constantly sabotaged by molehills and curious goslings. The sun is just high enough to make everything gold. Buttons trots ahead, humming to himself and occasionally barking at mushrooms. Whisper walks beside you, more relaxed than usual. No helm. No riddles. Just the swish of feathers against dew-wet grass. You pass a familiar tree, the one with the angry squirrel that once challenged you to a duel over breadcrumbs. Still there. Still scowling. You wave. The squirrel throws a pine cone. Ah. Just like old times. You approach the cottage slowly. Because something's different. There's smoke from the chimney. Not a fire. Just gentle tea steam levels. And the door is ajar. Inside, voices. You pause. Whisper glances up. Button snorts. I told them Tuesdays were off limits. You nudge the door open. And there they are. Your kitchen table is full. Not with strangers, but with the faces you've collected across the spirals. Clove, munching a stolen biscuit. Elia, polishing a feather quill. Master Quelth, writing notes into the margins of a book titled Rhetorical Honking in You. Thorn, sharpening a spoon for reasons unknown. Even Marlowe, his cravat slightly askew, his expression suggesting he just tried to make tea with gravy. They all look up. Ah, says Quelth. Just in time. For what? You ask, dropping your satchel by the door. The Spiral Council, says Clove, gesturing with a half-eaten apple. It's your turn to chair. You stare. There's a Spiral Council? Marlowe raises a hand. To be fair, we only started it 3 days ago. But tradition begins somewhere. You glance at the table. There's a seat at the head. On it your helm. Newly polished. Gleaming faintly with that spiraled shimmer. You sigh. Not out of frustration. Out of inevitability. You take your place. Buttons hops into a basket labeled adjunct. Whisper sits beneath your chair like a silent advisor who sometimes naps. Quelth clears his throat. Item 1, the reflecting pool is developing opinions. You nod. Item 2, adds Elia, the Duchess has sent word that her geese have started translating philosophy texts into breadcrumbs. She's concerned. Tell her that's expected, you murmur. Spiral 8 side effect. Marlowe whistles. Impressive. You raise an eyebrow. Wait until you get to Spiral 11. The metaphor gets personal. There's laughter. Genuine. Shared. You lean back for a moment and take it all in. Because this is what the spirals were leading to. Not a destination, but a gathering. A flock of sorts. And in the warmth of your tiny, crooked kitchen, the trials begin to feel like stories. Not challenges. Not puzzles. Just stories, meant to be told, heard, passed on. Thorn sets down his spoon. What's next? You smile. Pull the parchment from your bag. The one that continues to write itself, slowly, curling across the page in perfect spiral script. And you read the newest line aloud. Spiral 11, in which the goosekeep opens a school, misplaces 3 identical hats, and discovers that trust, like feathers, grows in molting seasons. Quelth claps softly. Clove honks in approval. And you begin again. Not as the tested, but as the storyteller. The one who remembers. The one who guides. The one who makes breakfast and answers when the reflection pool whispers at inconvenient hours. And in that moment, Spiral 10 becomes something bigger. It becomes home. You rise early the next morning, not because of duty or mystery or the sudden honk of a rogue gander, but because your floorboards creak in a way that only happens when someone, or something, is standing on them with the weight of purpose. You find Whisper perched on your windowsill, preening like a scholar reviewing citations. Buttons is halfway into a teacup, snoring audibly. And on the table, nestled between the spiral toast crumbs and last night's still-warm kettle, is a new object. A bell. Small. Polished. Tied with twine made from a single curled feather. It rings once as you touch it. And that's all it needs to do. Because suddenly, you're not in the kitchen anymore. you're standing at the edge of the pastures. But they're different now, wider, greener, fuller. Geese bustle with scrolls. Herders walk calmly between them. And in the distance, at the top of a gently sloped hill, is the spiral keep. No longer imagined. Not just a parchment dream from the reflection pool. It's real. And your name is carved beside the gate in a language only the spirals can fully pronounce. You walk slowly, drinking it in. The keep is made of soft stone and sharper shadows. Its towers curl, like parchment rolled too long. Its windows glow with morning and memory. Inside, a desk waits for you. And a chalkboard. And oddly, a shelf filled entirely with pickled turnips labeled Emergency Inspiration. You sit. Place the coin-shaped spiral stone on the desk. It hums. And above your head, a bell rings again. From the sky. From the spiral. From something older than both. And they come. The apprentices. Goosekeepers in training. Some with boots too big. Some with feathers in their hair. One with a scroll that's clearly been sat on by at least 3 goslings. You welcome them. Pour tea. Offer toast. Begin the first lesson. You teach them how to hear the spirals in silence. How to hold a goose without ego. How to read a spiral map with their eyes closed and their heart 3/4 open. You even teach them how to politely decline invitations from overly dramatic squirrels. The days pass. Each one more quiet than thrilling, but deeply satisfying. The kind of spiral you don't talk about because it's lived, not explained. You take walks. You let whisper lead story hours. You watch Buttons hold court with 3 baby goslings who believe he's a prince in disguise. And one day, many days later, you find a letter. Folded. Tucked into your pillow. From Marlowe. He's opened a spiral cafe. The kind where riddles are the menu, and tea comes in 3s. He says he misses your fig jokes. You smile. And tuck the letter into your cloak. Just beside your badge. The one the guild made for you, simple and soft, embroidered with a spiral made of goose tracks. You are the goosekeep now. The storyteller. The rememberer. The one who once wore a slightly dented helm and braved an archive that argued in riddles. And now? Now you make porridge. Now you mend feathers. Now you carry the spiral not in your bag, but in your voice. And it echoes gently. Whenever the kettle boils. Whenever someone asks, what happened next? And whenever a soft honk greets the dawn like a whispered sequel. The spiral turns. And so do you. So now, as the last spirals settle and the fields grow quiet, you sit once more by the window of your little crooked cottage. The moon is high and thoughtful tonight, hanging like a silver yoke in the sky, watching over the pastures with a gaze that knows far too many secrets, and chooses to say nothing at all. The geese are still. Not asleep, exactly. Geese are rarely so obliging, but quiet, contemplative, perhaps even dreaming their own spiral dreams. Somewhere in the distance, a fence creaks softly. A wind meanders by, carrying the faintest scent of thyme, parchment, and warm toast. You sip something warm. Doesn't matter what. In stories like this, it's always the right flavor. Button snores beside the hearth, curled into a pile of laundry that absolutely does not belong to him. Whisper sits at your feet, alert but relaxed, feathers puffed just slightly with the smug calm of a goose who has successfully completed an entire epic without once misplacing a quill. And you? You lean back. Let your breath slow. Let your eyelids dip lower. Because there are no more spirals tonight. Only rest. Only the soft, steady hum of a world that turned just right for once. Let your thoughts drift like feathers on a still pond. Let the night hold you like a well-worn cloak. There is nothing you must do. Nowhere you must go. The spiral will wait. And when morning comes, if it must, you'll rise again. Quietly. With the geese.